Aha.
Hello.
Hi, man.
How are you doing?
Yeah, good.
Good. Yeah, I mean, first of all, thanks for coming on. I appreciate taking the time to come and chat a bit about your career and how you got into this weird business of music.
Okay. Yeah, pleasure.
Yeah. So, I mean, going to the very origins of your story, I know you're now based in northeast England. Is that right?
Yeah, I've always been in the northeast of England. Moved around a bit, but basically always lived in this part of the country.
Yeah, never left.
Well, I've left to do other things, but always lived here. Yeah.
Yeah. And why is that? What keeps you there? What pulls you to stay there?
Gosh. Family, like it. Not really bothered about living down in the southeast of England, which is way too expensive and far too many people. It's nice up here that you can kind of, you can find spaces up here, the countryside, the beaches. So, yeah, just one of those things, not really necessarily something I've mulled over, just the way life's turned out.
Yeah. Well, I certainly understand that because I used to live in London and I lived there for maybe three and a half years.
Yeah, it's great. It's a capital city. All capital cities are fun. They're exciting. There's loads of things to do, but they are busy. My wife and I went down there a few weeks ago to see lots of art, and it's great. It's exciting, but it would do my head in trying to live amongst so many people. I must be honest.
Yeah, and I also got a bit fed up with. It's hard to put a word to it. In a sense, it's like greediness, but always like things are very focused on money and very, everybody's trying to extract the maximum amount of you, which is understandable. But also, I sort of, it felt very sort of heartless and soulless to me towards the end. And
well, I mean, again, it's a capital city, so it's a lot of the capital is in the capital city. If you think that's bad, try Los Angeles, for example. That does really feel like everybody wants a piece of you. I just think it's the nature of the capitalist system and the nature of the game, and all capital cities have a certain element of that, but they also have wonderful art and buildings and architecture and all those kind of things which make up for it. So you kind of pick and choose which things you want to take out. But you could do that as a visitor, but not so much if you live there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I did, just to be clear, I did, meet a lot of amazing people there. I'm not saying everybody is, greedy, but
no.
it's just trying to figure out the basics of like where you live and rent and everything. It's just, it's a bit much, for sure.
I like having space. We live basically 5 miles from the northeast coast. We have a dog which loves to go for a walk. So if we just fancy going for a walk, it's a 5-minute drive. We're on a beach and it's fantastic. If you live in the capital city, well, it depends where the capital city is, of course, in the world. But down there, it would take you, an hour just to get out before you'd lose the will. You'd lose the will to live before you get to the beach. So that's another reason why I like being a little bit out in the sticks.
Yeah, and you can't really take your dog for a swim in the Thames. So
Thames. Most of it probably wouldn't be a good idea. It would certainly come out a lot dirtier than it went in.
Yeah, you wouldn't get the same dog coming out of the river.
You did that would dissolve.
Yeah. So this is the same place where you grew up. You were born and raised in the same.
Yeah, I was born in a little town called South Shields, which is on the south side of the mouth of the River Tyne, which goes through Newcastle upon Tyne into the lovely, cold, shiveringly freezing North Sea. And then I moved to various places round about, and now I'm almost back where I started from in Sunderland, living with my wife and Labrador.
Nice. And growing up, what did your parents do?
This is a phrase which is very not really used these days. My father was what was called a statesman. Now you might say, what are staiths? Staiths of the wooden jetties where ships docked and undocked. And his job was to unload and load coal into big ships. And it's not, you can't just kind of take it all out of one side. You have to kind of, I assume, take it out on both sides in a sort of an orderly fashion. And that was his job as a staith man, which I'm not even sure is a profession any longer, but there you go. My mum was, she worked in school meals and looked after the kids. So that was, she kind of worked part-time and raised me, who I'm an only child.
Right. Okay. And was music ever around in the house, or was it completely absent?
No, it wasn't absent. My mum liked people like Shirley Bassey, Charles Aznavour, and folk like that, and would play Shirley Bassey extremely loud from time to time, which made me want to go and hide in my room. My dad was Frank Sinatra and classical, really kind of mainstream classical stuff like the 1812 Overture and that kind of stuff. So they had an old radiogram, it was called, this big long piece of furniture with a radio and a very basic turntable built in, but they would play records. In my family, I think one of my aunties, Janet, was good at the piano. She would play that, but there was nobody with my mum and dad weren't musically inclined, if that's what you're asking.
Yeah. What about creativity in general? Was that something that
my mum was quite
around?
creative. She was a dress designer when she was young, but that generation, I don't think she really got the chance. She didn't really get the chance to blossom and do what she maybe could have done. Same my dad, who was very bright, he could have gone to university, but his family were very poor. 6 kids. His dad had come back from the First World War, missing a leg, and first opportunity, 14, he had to go out to work. He had to go out to work to provide income for his mum and dad and the kids. So he didn't really get a chance to have a full-time education. So my dad was quite bright. My mum was quite a creative soul. But for whatever reason, in those days, they didn't really get those opportunities that, thankfully, and I really thank them for this, they managed to pass on to me that I could have a good education, and I have been able to express my creative vibe over the years, which is a privilege, of course.
Yeah. What kind of a kid were you growing up? Were you mischievous or introverted, extroverted? What was life like?
Kind of introverted, to be honest. I would. My mum would say I would delve into things. I was fascinated by astronomy, bird watching. I used to love bird. I still like bird watching. I have a pair of binoculars, that kind of thing. I was never really. I never really fell in with the in crowd, whatever the in crowd was. Football's obviously a huge thing in the northeast of England, and I was never really that bothered about it. So I was always a bit of an outsider. So yeah, when I was pretty quiet, I think, well behaved.
Right. How many bird species can you name? I don't know if species is even the right term, but
no, species is the right term. But how long have you got? I could fill your entire interview with that. So maybe I shouldn't go there.
Okay, you don't have to list all of them, but if you had to, guesstimate how many can you name? Is it in the hundreds? Or
hundreds. Yeah.
Yeah, that's
I'm not like I'm not one of those avid bird watchers who have a pager, and if there's a very rare bird somewhere in the Shetlands, I'll suddenly drop everything, get in the car and drive. I'm not that kind of bird watcher. But I don't really have that much time. I don't mind just walking along with my wife and our dog, and if I see a duck or a goose or whatever that I've seen 100 times before, it doesn't matter, because you might see them doing something different, or the light might be different. Every single time you ever go out, if your eyes are open, you will see something new. There'll be a little gift from nature, which will make you go, "Oh, that's kind of cool." I don't need to chase the rare birds. I don't need to have a list. Although I'm sure I've got one somewhere, but it's been a while since I've looked at it. So yeah, I'm very much into just, even after all these years, it was my dad who first got me into that. And I still remember, I think I must have been about 9 or 10. And I'd never seen an owl, and we were on holiday and we were driving along and we think we saw an owl or thought we saw an owl. So we screeched to a halt. We only had one pair of binoculars and my dad and I fought over who was going to have the binoculars, by which time the bloody thing had flown off. So we never actually got to see whether it was an owl or not. So that's a little something I remember of me and my dad when I was young. But it was certainly my dad who instilled a love of nature. And I think that's a wonderful gift to give a child. And I think if you've got that instilled in you when you're young, you carry it forward into your life. And when times get busy and hectic, it's always nice just to go for a walk and just let nature in.
Yeah, no, for sure. Well, of course, you already mentioned a couple of things that you were up to while growing up, but did you have any other hobbies?
Lego. I used to build things with Lego. Meccano used to build things with that. So it's a long time ago. It's a really long time ago. So it's, that kind of thing. I used to build things, and I often used to do things on my own. Being an only child, I think it makes you very self-sufficient. Where I had to entertain myself. I think it's probably quite a good skill. That is a musician, often the kind of musician I am. I'm often in the studio on my own, although I do, as I'm sure you're aware, do work with other musicians, which is also great. But often it involves long hours on your own, working on whatever you're working on. And that requires a certain degree of patience and not being bothered about being on your own.
Yeah. What was the other one? You said Legos and...
Meccano was like metal strips, and you could build bridges or cranes or whatever. So it was a British, and you should have a huge amount of Meccano. So I'd watch an episode of Thunderbirds on the TV and then build a spaceship, which looked a bit like that and that kind of thing. It took me hours. Again, it's something I would do on my own.
Yeah, yeah. Are they those kind of small little pieces that you can combine in geometric shapes?
Well, they're like the pieces of metal, and you've got screws, and it's almost almost like a mechanical engineering kind of thing. It's funny that I used to be really good at that, because later in life now I'm absolutely hopeless at anything to do with building things. The do-it-yourself for me is destroy it yourself. I'm terrible at that, but then again, that's quite good sometimes, because my wife never gives me those kind of jobs because I'm so bad at it.
Yeah. Well, it's I relate to the Lego stuff. My childhood was probably 90% of Legos.
Yeah, it's a great thing.
But yeah, it's fantastic for the imagination and ability to... I mean, I always say that it kind of gives you this ability to see the world in a modular fashion. You see things as sort of individual pieces rather than, this is a car or this is a business or whatever else. It kind of helps you break down things into sort of first principles in a sense.
Yeah, I think imagination you mentioned, I think, is a very important thing, especially for children, to stimulate their imagination. Maybe I'm being a bit old-fashioned here, but I find a lot of the online and gaming things are passive. They don't really necessarily stimulate your imagination because things are already laid out. I mean, I know a lot of the modern games are so clever. There's different paths you can go down, of course. But something like Lego, you've got basically a box of bricks and you build something. You can either follow instructions, but often what's better fun is you think, okay, I've got this kind of thing in my head, and you kind of improvise. And you never quite know what you're going to end up with. And of course, you can take those principles and put those into art or music. There's a similar kind of vibe going on there, where you often I picture something in my head, and then I have to figure out how to do it.
Yeah, and also I think what's a bit maybe underrated about Legos is obviously, like most kids will end up breaking apart the thing that they first built. But it's very useful to have the instructions and then, piece by piece understand how they come together to form this thing, which kind of gives you a general map of some of the possibilities. And then you can, break it and go do something else with it. But I find that for me, it gave like a reference, like, oh, this is, what you can do with it.
So like when I spent 3 days patching one of these modular synthesizers, and then I finish and I've got to take all the cables out again and start from scratch again.
Yeah. I don't. I love synth hardware, but to be honest, maybe it's a bit too. I'm also quite. What's the word? Neurotic in a way. Like I might get some high levels of anxiety from cable messes, but I guess that's the price to pay when it comes to playing with those.
Well, I'm sure we'll talk about modular later on, but perhaps we're jumping ahead of the game here, and we'll continue
Sure.
the thread we've got at the moment.
Yeah, sure. So you went to study biochemistry, right?
Yeah.
So can you take me through the process of, we covered you being a kid who, has these, personal hobbies and you're building Legos and watching birds. And how is biochemistry something you sort of picked up closer to the age of, going to study that? Or how did you, how do you bridge that gap? Like, how did you get into the whole field?
So I'm at, I went to an all boys school, a grammar school as it was called in the UK. And I was good. I had two things I was good at. I was good at art. I've always been good at art. I was good at art before I went to secondary school or high school or grammar school or whatever you want to call it. I was just good at art, and I loved art. And science was the other thing I was good at. Biology especially. When it got to physics and maths, I wasn't so good at that. Chemistry, pretty good. Biology, great. Art, good. So you go through your school, you do your stuff. Now, the music side of things, I didn't take on. I had to do music up to like the second or third year, and then I dropped that. It was taught in a very structured, and I didn't like the way it was taught. It didn't really interest me. I have this. I can recall a whole class. Remember, these are boys being told to tap out the rhythm of Mars from the Planet Suite. And it got just, it's like, why? So I was never very interested in that, but I was good at art and science. And then I got to do my you did A levels after your fifth year, you did your O levels. Then you did your A levels for 3 years. And then if you were good, you went to university. So during my A levels, I did biology, chemistry, and physics because I was good at science. But I wanted to do art, and most people did three subjects, but I said to my headmaster, look, I'd like to do art in my spare time because I can just do art, and it's not really something I have to spend hours. And he said, yeah, okay, we'll let you do art. So I did 4 A levels art in the 3 sciences. And the career teachers would always say, oh, you're good at art. Yeah, you're never going to get a job at art. No, science, you want to do science. You're going to get a job at science. It's all about getting a job. So biology, chemistry, biochemistry, I thought I'll give that a go. I was interested in it. Was I passionate though? Can't recall. Was I passionate with art? Yeah, I kind of was. I mean, I love doing art. And I did it in my spare time, and I got my A level, no problem doing art. And I had funny, of all the school teachers I had all those years ago, the only school teacher's name I can recall is the art guy, Mr. Veach. I can remember his name, but I can't remember any of the science teachers' names. You can take whatever you want from that. So it came to do university, and biochemistry is what I did.
And what sort of art were you creating during this time? Was it like visual arts or?
Yeah, I was painting. I went down a route of, it got more and more abstract, and it was starting to become like optical art, like Vasarely, that kind of, those kind of patterns and shapes. So I got more. We'll talk about university in a minute because the art thing continues, and that's quite important. But yes, I was getting more and more abstract. I wasn't interested in painting things. There's cameras for that. I never saw the point. I mean, obviously, there's people who paint things who do it extremely well, but I was never interested in that. I was always interested in imagination and making something up and doing the abstract. So science, art, careers teacher. don't do art. You never make a career in art. So there you go.
Yeah. And so you did. How far did you get into biochemistry before you were like?
Well, I did the degree. I did
the whole thing.
I did the whole thing, and it was pretty cool. I mean, it was, I did really good things, DNA and RNA, and how things actually work. It's a fascinating subject to do. But here's the thing about the art. I wanted to continue doing art, but I was at university. I actually only went to university in Newcastle, which is just up the road from me. I wanted to do the art, and I found out about this place called Spectro Arts Workshop. And what it was an open access facility, which is wonderful. Every city in the world should have one of these, but probably won't, but they don't. And what I mean by open access, anyone could go in. You didn't have to be qualified or not qualified. Anyone could go in, and there was a photography place, there was screen printing place, basically. There was a cafe, there was an art gallery upstairs. Unbeknownst to me, there was also a sound studio upstairs. But initially, I went in, and I was able to do these screen prints. And in my spare time, just for a bit of relaxation, these are big screen printing, big frames kind of things, not the kind of thing you're going to have at home. And I would do art. I would do my screen prints, and I learned all sorts of new techniques, and doing that kind of optical art kind of vibe. It was pretty cool. And then one day, this is in my first year of university, so I would have been 18. I think it was in the Science Fiction Society meeting at the university, which I was in. We're having a pint of beer talking about science fiction books, and somebody said, "You're into all this weird stuff like Tangerine Dream and Vangelis and Klaus Schulze, aren't you?" I went, yeah. You do know there's a sound studio in Spectro Arts Workshop? And I was like, is it? Where is that? It's upstairs. Okay. And this is such a vivid, I can remember to this day walking past the screen printing on the ground floor, opening a door, going up the concrete steps, going through another door, opening another door into the sound studio and going, whoa, what is this? There was 3 VCS3s, Revox tape recorders. And I'm like, yeah, this is pretty interesting. And got one of the guys to show me how some of the stuff worked, and lo and behold, these sounds emerged. And I'm not making this up. Quite literally, within a month, I'd packed all my screen printing things away, and I've never stopped since. It's as simple as that. It was like a little switch in my head went ding. That's cool. That's what I want to do.
Yeah. When you stepped into that studio, was it just the fascination of the technology? Like, if you had to sort of somehow describe what stopped you in your tracks and struck you?
It wasn't so much the it wasn't so much that, because I didn't understand anything. I hadn't even seen a synthesizer before, maybe on the TV, a video Kraftwerk or something, but I hadn't seen a synthesizer in the flesh. The VCS3s are that really strange. I got one lurking over my shoulder here. It's a very strange L-shaped thing with the matrix pin board on that you can do all those BBC Radiophonic Workshop sounds. It was when they made the sounds, those are the sounds that I loved from the Tangerine Dream and Klaus Schulze records. Those were the sounds that I had heard when I was a teenager before I went to university, that stopped me in my tracks and went, this is amazing. This music, who's doing this? This music's doesn't even sound like it's made by a human person. It sounds like it's been beamed in from space. It was the sounds. It was the actual sounds themselves that made me go, that's art. Your composing doesn't have to be notes in a piece by Bach or whatever. It can literally be pure sound.
Yeah. On your website, I think it stated that you got into synths mostly through experimentation. You did mention this one guy who helped you understand probably some of the basics of how to operate the stuff, but was it purely through experimentation where you gathered your your knowledge and skills, or did you start to study synthesis at any point, or audio engineering or anything like that?
I'm totally self-taught. It was literally the showing me how to turn the VCS 3 on, and then I had to figure it out. I just figured it out. I did things like echo from tape. I actually figured out how to do it myself. I had the mixer. Okay, if you record to that channel and then you bring the sound back into a different channel of the mixer and then you send it back round, I wonder what that's going to sound like. Whoa, that's cool. It's echo. Nobody actually told me how to do that. I used to do the thing with the Revoxes, 2 tape recorders, like the Frippatronics thing. One Revox over there, and then the tape go and record on there, then several feet across the studio to this tape recorder. And then that feeds back to that one in a really long loop. And then you can do the really cool, long, as I said, Frippatronics types. I figured it out. And then one day I saw discrete music in that little diagram on the back. And I went, oh, yeah, that's what I did. So it was totally self-taught. I've never had a music lesson in my life of any shape or form.
Nice. Well, I mean, you did, because, I mean, it's a lesson to experiment and learn. So in that sense, but teaching yourself through the process, of course. What was the next step from there? Did you immediately have this idea that, hey, I wanna create an album with this, or did you first just spend a ton of time experimenting? And what was the next step of, like, let's make something tangible or real with this, like an album or something?
Slow process. I'm at university I'm supposed to be studying for a degree, but once I'd been bitten by this bug, every bit of spare time I was down there. It was like, okay, and here's the AKS, the suitcase version of the VCS3. Okay, I'm playing on that. I've made a sequence. Why does this sound bad? Someone went, it's because it's out of tune. What do you mean it's out of tune? So then I had to figure out why it was out. Then I learned how to tune things. I got a tuning fork. I think I've still got the tuning fork somewhere. Ding. Okay, get the oscillator, and things are sounding better now, because literally that kind of vibe, literally bit by bit. And I had another friend at university, coincidentally the one who had mentioned the sound studio upstairs. And after 6 months or so, somebody went, yeah, we want to put a few concerts on. Could you guys do a concert? And we're like, what? What? Okay, yeah, we'll do a concert. Now, this is not a joke. We were going to use the VCS3s, and we were going to be the support to a guy who was one of these avant-garde guys. Can't really remember his name. Maybe I shouldn't mention his name, even if I could. Half an hour before the concert, we kind of wandered in from the pub, and the guy said, yeah, I'm going to use the VCS3. And we're like, what? Well, we can't. So we didn't do the concert, because literally the gear we were going to use, this guy used. So that was the first concert. So that didn't go down so well. But a few months later, the same scenario. And we basically figured out how to do a concert. We had tape. It was really experimental, tape loops and VCS3s. And we just kind of like, making it up as we went along. And then I started to get a little bit better, and I started to do some tracks, and then I did another couple of concerts on my own. And then this letter came through. Not an email in those days. This is 1979 now. There was a little cassette label in the UK called Mirage. And they wrote me a letter and said, we've heard a couple of your concerts. I don't know how. It must be a bootleg, I guess. And I said, yeah, that's cool. Could you do us an album and we'll put it out on cassette? And I'm like, yeah, okay. So I did. So I recorded, called Images, it was called. It came out in 1980. And it had 3 shortest tracks on the first side and a couple of more experimental long form tracks on the second side. And then it came out and it sold a few. And this check arrived for, I think it was like £27 or something. This is like 1980. Wow, £27. This is great,
You made it.
Yeah, I'm well on the way here. My mum's like, don't be so daft. Go back and do your degree and get a proper job. So it just kind of grows, and I would spend every bit of my spare time, going in the studio. Didn't have time for girlfriends and all that kind of stuff. I had to go in the studio and figure out how to record the next track and then the next track, and then you just get better at what you're doing because you're learning all the time, but you're so passionate at what you're doing. It's just a joy. I can still remember doing tracks, and I would be on my own on a Sunday afternoon playing this at full pelt, jumping around the studio just with unadulterated happiness and joy and excitement at what I've just done. And I listen back to that track now and I think, what on earth were you thinking?
Typical experience.
But it's great. It's you can't reproduce that in any other way. I've found that unbridled, like you've got this passion and you've created something which didn't exist when you woke up, and then it's 3:00 in the afternoon and this piece exists. Whether it's good or not, it doesn't matter at all. It's yours and you've done it, and that's what's important.
Yeah. And when you created Images, was this still in that same studio?
Yeah. I mean, I couldn't afford VCS 3s and stuff like that. I mean, it was a bizarre. Times have changed a lot now since I was at university. Most of the students end up with huge debts these days. I actually got paid a grant because my parents weren't so well off, and I actually got paid a grant to go to university, and half the first grant got used on a string synthesizer. Never mind food or things like that. I bought a string synthesizer.
Which one?
I can't remember the model number, but I think it was a Gen. And it kind of, because I could do chords, so I had to then learn how to play chords. What's you sing chords? More than one note at once? Okay, I better figure out how that goes. C minor? So I like C minor. I do a few of those, and you just kind of learn.
Was this studio funded by the city or the town, or?
It was the Art Council. It was a wonderful place. As I said, it eventually got turned into a car park, such as the modern world. It kind of transformed into another place, but it never had this vibe. It had this wonderful vibe where people of all ages and all abilities would come in, and they would form collectives, and we did weird things like Terry Riley and C. I remember playing a version of that with people who knew how to play and people who didn't know how to play. Didn't matter. It was just a lovely, cool environment where art and photography and sound and whatever all came together. And I would love to think most major cities could have a place like that. But I don't think the world or the politicians are quite as, haven't got that foresight, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think here, at least in Finland, I know that in our city as well as Helsinki, there is a studio in the library that you can just book. And they have like high grade stuff there, like proper stuff in there. But I've never used, but
well, it's good. I mean,
sounds amazing.
You had to pay to use this place, but it wasn't very expensive. And after a while, they kind of looked at me and they went, "Yeah, you're doing pretty well. Can you teach a few people how to use those things? And in return, you can just use the studio for free. In fact, here's the keys. You can just have the keys and go on a Sunday." I'm like, "Yeah, sure, yeah, it's great." So I would actually teach other people after a while how to use this gear, and in return, I kind of got free access to the place, which is, this is an amazing opportunity. I think even at the time I thought, this is pretty cool. I can indulge what I want to do here. I'm sure I'm going to get a proper job, but in the meantime, I'll just, indulge myself.
Yeah, I was going to ask, it sounds like you spent a lot of time there. So was the place busy, or did you have a lot of time for yourself there?
No, I mean, it could get busy. I would book in. It was mainly on weekends I would go, which was on a Sunday it would be shut. And as I said, they trusted me with the keys, so I would let myself in on a Sunday and spend all Sunday there on my own with synthesizers and tape recorders and cool stuff. I loved it.
Yeah. Okay, so you got mailed what, £29 for this.
Yeah, that was the first a royalty check. My first royalty check came through.
Yeah, nice. So what was the next step from there? What was? It doesn't sound like at this point you were thinking about this as a viable career thing.
Well, I mean, you can kind of dream. You can kind of think, it'd be great to do this, wouldn't it? You know, you're going to need more than £27 to do this. I finished my degree. I got a proper job in a biochemistry lab in the hospital in Newcastle. Working in the biochemistry labs, testing various samples and doing all that kind of stuff, which I hated. After 5 years of that, I hated every second of every day. I just the routine, it wasn't really an office, but the small-minded bickering of the people who worked there. In the meantime, in my spare time, I did a second cassette for Mirage. I did a third cassette for Mirage. I did more concerts. I started doing concerts outside the Northeast. There's a local record shop who I used to always go into and buy stuff from them on records and things. And they said, "We're going to set up a record label. We'd love you to do a record for us. Could you do the first record for us on vinyl?" Oh, yes, okay. So The Climb. So this was a big jump. Cassettes are kind of cool, but going to vinyl was a big jump in the quality of what I could do. And I was obviously starting to accumulate some gear. I had this amazing opportunity where a musician called Jan Steele, who, if you are into the obscure record label that Brian Eno released, he's on one of them, and he was a jazz saxophone player. He had a residency at Spectro, got to know him really well. He's a lot older than I was. Well, he seemed so at the time, so sorry, John, if you're listening to this, maybe you're not that much older than I am. But he taught me a lot of stuff. Not specifically, but just the general outlook. And he said, "Can you come? We're setting up a studio in Birmingham, similar to Spectro. Would love you to be the artist in residence for the first week when it's open, then do a concert at the end." So I went, yeah, okay. So I couldn't drive. I had to take my modular synthesizer and stuff on the train. I couldn't carry it off in one go, which was a bit nerve-wracking. I had to throw it off and get back on the train. And I did a week there. And they said, "Yeah, there's a studio here. I've got a Fairlight. Would you like to have a go at that?" Yeah, okay. That would be quite nice. So made sure I recorded the 30 to 45 minutes I had on the Fairlight. So on The Climb, proudly listed in the list of gear, which I owned, or a Spectro was a Fairlight. So the Climb was a big jump up in quality. And then I did another couple of pieces of, things on Spirits and another couple of Air records after that. So things are gradually coming up, but at the same time, my other life, I'm married by this point. I've got a child. I'm in the health service, and I hate it. I hate it. I hate the fact that two people could be in the labs. One could be a lazy person who does hardly any work at all. Somebody next to them could discover the cure for cancer. Doesn't matter. You both be treated like... I hated it. So I made this huge radical jump in that I went to work for a music shop. People thought I was mad, but it wasn't quite as simple as that. This was 1985. In 1993, Yamaha introduced the DX7. And this was a revolutionary synthesis, I'm sure you're aware. And everybody went, "Oh, I can't program that, it's too hard." Guess who could program it? I didn't mind it, and I learned how to use it, and I used it. I was one of the very first people to have a DX7 in the UK, and there was this big concert in 1983 called UK Electronica, one of the first UK Electronica in the UK, and all sorts of artists played at this. This was down in Milton Keynes for the South in England, and I went down to play at this concert. First concert outside the Northeast, so that was a big deal for me. And I had my DX7 on stage, and nobody else had a DX7, and there was a big review of this whole festival in a music newspaper called Sounds. It's defunct now as far as I know. And when it came to my bit, all it talked about was the sounds the DX7 made. It didn't talk about me or what I was doing. It was just like, thanks. It's great, it's my big limelight in this concert and talking about the bloody DX7. But to cut a long story short, this shop called Rock City in Newcastle didn't want me to work in the shop. They were going to produce a series of ROM chips with patches on for the DX7. And it was one of the very, very first people to ever do this. I think they were called Sky Slip ROMs and RAMs. And there was like a black piece of plastic with the metal you plug into the ROM, but you could screw on different ROM chips on to change your banks of sounds. And for the first 6 months, I just programmed DX7 sounds. And they went on this ROM chip and they sold, and that was great. And then other people started getting into that game, and then sales kind of started to go down until one day the guy said, yeah, you're probably going to have to work on the shop floor as well. What? I mean, like, to sell things? Yeah. I'm like, okay. So I ended up working in this shop, although after a while I kind of was in charge of the education division, so I would go to schools and teach people how to use this gear. So that was quite nice.
Yeah, that's a big.
It's a lot to digest there.
Yeah. No, I wanted to touch on the thing that you said about the workplaces and the people dynamics, and because this is a position I'm sure a lot of creative people are in. There's something they actually want to do, but they have to work another job, and it wouldn't be so bad. Like, to me, what is toughest about doing a job that you don't like is the people part. Because I take social interactions and connections and, for the lack of a better word, energies very heavily. And they influence me very strongly. And that's the thing that drains your energy the most. Because what you need the most after a long day of working, presuming you want to go home or to your studio and work on music, you need to have energy. But if you're like exhausted about the people and all the drama and all the workplace, drama and stuff like that, it's super, super draining. So now in hindsight, do you have any tips on that other than get the hell out of there?
Well, I mean, life's a complicated thing, and it doesn't always go how you want. And why should it? It's just, you end up going down paths. And if life was fair and you could get everything you want, you could choose your path. You could choose exactly the path you want to do. But life's not like that. And there's the realities of life. You have a family. By this time, I had a child, a young girl, and you've got responsibilities, and sometimes you've got to do what you've got to do, and you can whinge all you want, but what's the point? You've got to do what you've got to do. You have to always find time for yourself, and it depends on what you like. A lot of people find solace in going to a football match and going, yeah, and all that. I've never kind of got that, and I'm not disparaging that in the slightest. Our local team is doing great at this point in time, and that's fantastic. But I never felt that didn't draw me, and I am not making any judgments on that. It's just, this is me I'm talking about now. What appeals to me, and I would read books, and I would look at cool weird films, and I would go and try to talk to my workmates, and they're like, "What are you talking about? The music you do, what's that craft work? They're rubbish, them." And I'm like, what? Just what? Don't you understand the beauty of the world? Some people don't even seem to understand the beauty of the world. They're just interested in what the soap opera was going on that night. And that's fine. That's them. But this is me, and I'm not getting anything from that conversation. And we all find our own tribe. And if you want to watch soap operas, your tribe is people who are interested in that. If you went to football, your tribe is people who are interested in that. My tribe is, I suppose, more the artistic world, and that's a minority, of course, and it's even more of a minority with the kind of stuff that I like. But that's fine. So I was never in. I was never in with the clique. I was never in with the in crowd. So you've just got to grin and bear it sometimes, like you have to in life. I don't think there's an easy answer to this, and we each struggle with that in our own ways. You said you find it really difficult, and I totally understand that. Totally understand that. I would just compartmentalize. I've got this ability to compartmentalize my head. And what I mean by that is I can take the nonsense from work or what was nonsense at work, and I can just shove it in a box and shove it under the stairs and then go in my studio and enjoying myself and trying, of course, as it impinges on you, but I'm able to do that, but other people can't do that or find it more difficult to do that, and that must be even more difficult to cope with these sort of things. But, so I haven't really answered your question because everyone is different, of course, but that's the kind of way I do it. I guess I was able to compartmentalize those things and just they weren't important to me. So why? And the older you get, you basically don't care.
That's the secret superpower of getting old. You
stop giving a fuck, basically, because, I know what I like and I've got my tribe and I love the people who I love, and I like being kind to other people, and I'll give them time, and I'll listen to what they say, but they don't need to necessarily be a significant part of my life.
Yeah. So, what came next? You're working at this music shop, selling instruments now.
Yeah, which is great because, of course, I got to play with all these new synthesizers, and I could buy things at trade prices, which was good. Akai is what happened next. The sampler company, who obviously leading up to the end of the 80s, were really becoming quite a superpower in the sampling world. In my shop, my boss, for some reason, had fallen out with the boss with Akai in the UK and didn't sell Akai. And I'm like to my boss, look, why don't we sell Akai? Akai's really cool. We should be selling the Akai S900, He said, well, if you think you can sell it, we'll get some in. You got some in. I sold loads. I thought they were great. Sampling was a whole new ballpark, and my music was still going along. I'd actually got this strange record deal. After the 3 vinyl records, a local heavy metal record label said to me, we can get you a deal with an American publisher if you can do kind of like an ambient ethnic kind of thing. I went, okay, sounds good. There'll be an advance. That sounds even better. So I created an album called Jade. It was so different. It was when I first used sampling. And I remember when I mixed it in their studio, they had a big studio, big desk. I think I borrowed something like 6 S900 samplers, all in a big stack. And I think I sequenced it all live. I don't think I had the Atari 1040 then. It might have been from a Roland microcomposer. Can't recall. But that's why I was really getting into sampling. I could do all these ethnic sounds, the shakuhachi sample, and the sounds of streams and chime bells and strings and all that kind of stuff. So it was taking me away from the synthetic side of things, but that was an interesting path to follow. And that's why I was so into the Akai stuff. For strangely enough, this record deal fell through, but I still got to keep the advance, so that was great. So I've got to buy some more gear. So the Akai guys, the rep for Akai, who I knew quite well, he said, I'm going to leave. I'm going to get another job elsewhere. I'm going to work for another company. Fancy a change? You should apply for the job. I went, okay. So I applied for the job. I went down on the train all the way down south, went to the office, spoke to Dave Caulfield, who was the boss at the time. So the Japanese guy who was the head of and I got the job there and then. I said, great, you'll be the Akai rep. This is in 1990. My wage tripled overnight. And I got lots of Akai gear to play with. And I got a nice car. And I could tour around the north of England, Scotland as well, and Ireland, which was great. And see people and talk to people and make contacts while selling the Akai gear. And I would do a lot of demonstrations. I was good at showing people how to use the gear. And that's what I did for 12 years.
And how much, well, maybe before the Akai job, how much like percentage-wise, do you think you were spending on gear? Because you on the side you mentioned accumulating this equipment. So
not a huge amount. I mean, probably by the end of the 80s, I had a DX7, a D50. Probably had my Roland System 100M, a couple of racks of that. Had a 606, a TB303, which I hated, by the way, and wanted to sell it as quick as possible. That was a bit of a mistake, but there you go. Probably had a Roland S, a few not like what I've got now, a few things, a decent amount, enough to make nice albums and do little concerts, but not a huge amount. Although it would appear that, I'm sure you can see behind me, I've got a lot of gear now. It's certainly not as much as some people have. I've never been, had the budget to just spend it with no thought whatsoever, but it's, so I was spending a bit, but what percentage? I had a young child, I had a house, I had bills, you've got to make sure those things are fed first.
Yeah. So you are now working, at this time you were working at Akai for the, you said 12 years?
Yeah, 1990 till 2002 when it went bust.
Oh, right.
Well, we should reserve that for a few.
Sure.
There's other things to talk about first with Akai, because it was a very important job for a few reasons. It was just a great job. I mean, I was going around selling S1000s and stuff. I mean, it's not exactly a hard job. I've never thought I would be a salesman. I'm too honest. I couldn't sell insurance or double glazed windows. I couldn't go to a house and say, these are the best double glazed windows in the world. And the person said, oh, but are they really? And I would go, no, they're not actually. They're pretty. I couldn't do that. But is the S1000 the best studio sampler? At the time, yes, it was. Oh, the EMUs were pretty cool as well. But you know what I mean? They were right up there. Pretty much every self-respecting studio had S1000s in. It wasn't a difficult sell. MPC 60s. Is the MP6 is it good? Yeah, it really is good. So it wasn't a difficult sell. So that was one thing. The second thing was I got paid quite a bit, so I was able to buy more stuff from his studio. Although I was given a lot of Akai gear, I didn't actually have to spend it. But probably for the long term, the most important thing was the contacts I made, of which there's 2 strands. So I don't know if you want me to talk about that or not.
Yeah, absolutely. No, you can go straight into it.
The first one's sound design. So we've already talked about me doing these DX7 sounds, and sound design's always been part of what I do. In fact, to me, sound design in musical composition is the same thing. For me, there's no, I don't have a line between, okay, this is sound design, this is composition. It's a continuum. The one and the same thing for me. And I've done these DX7 sounds. I did a lot of my own sounds for the Akai, not the official Akai sound lab. But when I was doing my demonstrations, my boss said to me, "Can you do some demos?" So I'll just play my own tracks. I would play these Berlin School spacey things with VCS3 sound effects flying all over. Not your average kind of demos where kind of guys play jazz funk or whatever. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but you know what I mean? The kind of demos that I did was the kind of music that I played. It wasn't your average kind of demo. Now, sound libraries didn't really exist at this point in time. But in the UK, I'm talking about 92 here, Zero G. Have you heard of them?
Yeah, the UK.
Yeah,
company.
they were just about, somebody may know it differently, but certainly one of the very first, if not the first, sample library company. And they'd done 2 or 3, I think. And Ed Stratton was the guy who formed this company, and I think he'd done the first couple. And they were at one of the trade shows that I was at, because I would go to trade shows with Akai, and we had the Akai stand, and I had a little wander around, and I saw the Zero G stand, and I spoke to Ed. "Oh, hi, how are you doing?" And he said, "Yeah, we're looking for people to do more content for the sound libraries. I've heard some of your stuff. It's pretty cool, man. Could you do a sound library for us?" And I'm like, "Yeah, okay." What's a sound library? How do you do a sound library? Now, I must be honest, the Akai guys were great because strictly speaking, I probably, my job was with Akai. I shouldn't have been going off doing other things, but they didn't mind. And I produced, I think it was the 4th sample library 0G ever did. It was called Ambient Volume 1 at the time, or Ambient. Had a picture of a waterfall on the front, I think. That wasn't my idea, but there you go. And I did a load of sounds. Some acoustic sounds with percussion and weird sounds and bits of metal being scraped and some synth sounds. How on earth do you compile this in those days? I didn't really have a music computer. Akai had this thing called the DD1000, which was the very early hard disk editing machine. Cost a fortune. And I had one on loan. So I used that to create and I just got into sound design like that was 0G. So that was a really important contact to make. And amazingly, it sold loads because people were hungry after content for their samplers, and there was only 4 from them. And then a little bit after that, I think East West came out, and then the guys, the other companies came out, but there was hardly anyone producing sample libraries. So that was a way in for me to doing sound design.
Nice. I didn't know so what year was this when this happened?
This is probably 1992. I would have to look it up. You'd have to go to the 0G website. Ambient, it's called, is the 4th library they ever did. And I think it was 92 or 93 it came out.
Yeah. No, it's a really cool company. I've done some collaborations with them.
I've done, so over the years, I did loads of stuff for them. Initially, this Ambient was just an audio CD. It wasn't Akai samples as such. You had to load in the samples and then make your own Akai programs, I think. But after a while, we did CD-ROMs. And then over the years, I've worked for Camel Audio when they existed before they got swallowed up by the Apple company. I worked for them, and Rob Pappen, I did some stuff for him. Linplug, when they were out, I did stuff for them. Obviously, Sonic Couture, which we may talk about later, because obviously there's that. So there's several different companies over the years. So sound design's been one of the things that I've done. But then there's the second important thing that happened at Akai, and that was the library music world. I'm assuming you know what library music is, but just for your listeners who don't, this is music where as a composer you write themes in different styles, not a commission for a film, but you do it, and then the library music company puts this out to film companies, documentary makers, TV companies, radio stations, and these get picked up, and if it gets used, you get royalties from that. And it's a great way of earning an income. It's not as prestigious as being a full-blown film composer where your name will be on the credits, but you have a chance of it getting used a lot all over the place. So you might not get one big fee for a commission, but you don't have all the pressures that has in terms of time scale. You have to do stuff, and it just kind of builds up. It just kind of nicely builds up over the years. And often people had said to me, "You do very cinematic stuff. Have you ever thought of doing a film soundtrack?" Yeah, of course. But it's, I'm a little humble musician in the Northeast. It's going to be quite hard for me to get into that. I'd probably have to move down south or move to Los Angeles, and I'm not going to do that. It wasn't my vibe. So I'm doing these demos for Akai, as I said, playing these weird and wonderful tracks. I think I was playing some stuff from an album of mine called The Uncertainty Principle, and it was all spacey and tangerine dreamish kind of thing. And afterwards, I'm chatting to people in the crowd. I think it was a little demo that I did for the Akai gear somewhere down in Stoke or somewhere. And this guy came up, and unbeknownst to me, he's the main, pretty much Andy Quinn he's called the main composer at DeWolf. He can write in any style. He's an amazing guy. Any style he can write in. And he said to me, "That's pretty good. You should send some of that stuff off to DeWolf, and I'll give you the contact name. You can send your stuff off and see what they say. Can't promise anything." I'm like, "Okay, that's great." So I just released a new album, I think it was 94, called The Deep. It was inspired by the film The Abyss, the James. I've also been fascinated by that, what lurks right down at the bottom of the sea. So it was kind of a concept album. Sent off The Deep, and of course, a few months later, or a few weeks, you get the letter we've all had. Thanks very much. That's very interesting stuff there, but unfortunately, at the moment, we can't help you. And you go, okay, fair enough, and you file it in the bin, because you get lots of these letters, and I'm sure many of your listeners will have had these letters, and it's fine. It's not an insult. It's just the way the world is. They're busy. They're a big company. But then 6 months later, the phone went. It didn't recognize. Actually, when I say I didn't recognize the phone number, because it wasn't a smartphone, then it wouldn't have shown you what the number was. I answered a regular telephone. Warren from DeWolf here. Oh, hi. Yeah, we might have a project that your stuff would be good for. Could you do us 18 tracks all about machines and stuff like that? And I went, yeah, okay. So I did 18 tracks. Now, library music is a very different discipline to writing albums and being self-indulgent in what you do. They all have to be short. I'm talking like 2.5, 3 minutes long. They have to have an ending, a distinct musical ending. It doesn't necessarily have to go da 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 da, but it has to have an ending to it. Sometimes if it's a more abstract piece, it might just be a crescendo at the end. And you can't be that self-indulgent with VCS3 sound effects all over the place. It has to kind of get to the point. And you often have to do a 30-second sort of cut of it as well, and something is even a 10-second cut, and something is a sting. There's all these little edits you have to do. But it's kind of cool, and they were quite good with me in that they kind of give me free rein. And I did this album, and I sent it down, and they went, yeah, that's great. We've got another thing. Now here's this little cycle come. We'd like you to do one about under the sea. And I went, you remember I said I did send you The Deep? And they went, oh yeah, of course. Oh, we hadn't thought about that, but we just thought, and it was like a little ring going, and I had to do, the second library album was about under the sea. And over the years, I've lost track now. I've done about 600 tracks for them. And they all earn a bit, and it all adds up. And you get these bits 4 times a year from the PRS, and you get them whether you get out of bed or not, and you get them for a long time. And it's been the financial foundations on how I've built the career I've had in the music career. It's built a financial foundation for when I finally did go fully professional, which I'm sure we'll talk about in a moment or two. I already had some income coming in on which I could build.
Yeah, it's definitely, it adds up. It's kind of like a business, teaches you the simple business concepts of numbers, because you can, when you have a catalog that's big, that is that big, like 600 tracks, even if, each of them make a bit, over time it will stack up. And obviously some of the tracks will jump far higher and, produce a larger percentage of the total sum as well.
I mean, you have no control when these things get played. I mean, the standard library music deal throughout the industry is you basically sign the rights to them. They own those tracks. They can do whatever they want with those tracks. And in return, their job is to get those tracks used. They have the contacts with the BBC, with film companies. I don't have those contacts. They have the staff, the time, the contacts. They get these tracks used because it's to their benefit. Nobody gets paid if the tracks don't get used. In the deals, you get 50%. You get 50% of all the royalties that come through. They get 50%. But you never know what's going to get used. In fact, one of the tracks that's earned the most was a Mini Moog bass drone. That's what it was. It was a very nicely recorded Mini Moog bass drone with tape echo, but it was basically a lovely solid brrr, and it kind of builds it at the end. And it got used on this children's TV show called Basil Brush, which is a fox for people who are out to the UK. It's a funny show for kids, and it was all they used this thing when there was a bit of threat, this mild threat. So when there was something dangerous about to happen, I mean, it wasn't really dangerous; it was a kids show. But when it was a bit of danger, there was brrr, and it was my brrr, and I got thousands over the years, thousands for something that took me half an hour to do. I'm sure AI could do it now, but that's a whole different subject we may or may not talk about. And other tracks, it took me a week, a big orchestral thing. I didn't get a penny from it. Who knows? But overall, the law of averages, this stuff makes an income. And I was they really did indulge me. Basically, when they wanted a library music of weird shit, they came to me. If it was jazz or classical or rock, they didn't come to me. They went to somebody else. Weird shit, Boddy will have him because he can do all that he can do that stuff. So that's cool.
So was most of, if not all of the work, kind of like a semi-order commission thing? Like, oh, we need this kind of a stuff? Or could you go ahead and write something on your own and pitch it to them?
A bit of both. Most of the subject matter they give me were things like, these are the actual names of some of the library albums: Space, Under the Sea. So actually, I think one was Space, The Unknown, in UFOs. That was a bit of an odd one because one of the tracks has said, "Can you do a pastiche of the X-Files theme?" Yeah, all right then. So you kind of, yeah, that was a bit of a, okay, well, you kind of do a pastiche of it, not the same notes, but kind of same sounds and that kind of thing. But sometimes I would go to them, and I mean, one of the main things that earned a hell of a lot, it was crazy. I said, rather than structured tracks, I'll do an album with maybe 30 drones, just drones. They're not going to do anything dramatic, but they're going to be atmospheric drones. They're going to paint, and they're going to create an atmosphere. They're going to be bright. They're going to be light drones to create a beautiful atmosphere, and there'll be dark and doomy drones. And they went, that sounds great. No one's done that. I did it. This is like 98 or something. I can't remember. 98, 99. So I just spent a few months doing drones and give them the album, and it got used loads of places. All over the place, in some very strange and bizarre places as well, but all over the place. So that was one where I went with the idea to them. But obviously, often they would phone me up and say, yeah, the Space one did well. Can you do Space 2? I mean, doing an album of Space tracks for me is like falling off. It's it's great. I know how to do music that sounds like it's floating in space.
Yeah. Well, that's helps. I'm sure. Like you have to think in a kind of a utilitarian way as well, at least as a starting point, to think about what are the kind of films or applications where certain types of music is needed, and then you sort of choose the theme based on that. But also, I think to me it seems like, because one of the issues of being a composer is that a lot of people, if they're commissioned to do something, they lose interest because it's like they want to choose what they want to write versus writing for a very specific end goal. And this sounds kind of like maybe a good hybrid to explore for a lot of composers, where you can write something. You obviously need a theme, something that you can clearly pitch and sell to a library music company. But you can still, within, as long as you tick those boxes, you can basically do whatever you want. Do you have any thoughts on, well, not whatever you want, but within the parameters that you mentioned?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's a good skill set to get, being concise. Doing the kind of music that I do, sometimes you can be quite indulgent, but being concise sometimes is a good skill set. But yes, I've never had a film commission, a full film commission. Would I have liked to have had one? Yes. But I never had a film commission. I haven't really chased it, to be honest. Um, you know, but if I'm writing stuff about, say, space, it's kind of interesting me, and and I could try out ideas, and often these ideas then get taken on a later date and turned into my own pieces and expanded. But it would also allow you to learn interesting new things. Now, I've said I'm self-taught. I learned at some point in time that a whole tone scale is a really cool scale to have if you want to get a B-movie 50s, 60s sci-fi feel, because a whole tone scale never resolves. I'm assuming you know what I mean by a whole tone scale. For those who are a whole tone scale, there's no semitones. It's literally is what it says. It's all whole tones. It never resolves. So it has this floating in space kind of vibe, and a lot of composers who do those kind of soundtracks, it has a very distinctive flavor. It's like, as often I make the analogy, composing and using things like scales and modes is like the spices and herbs when you cook. It gives things it has a flavor to it. Oh, excuse me. So doing the library stuff enabled me to gain other skills as well. So not only was obviously the financial rewards nice, but I was able to. There's a lot less pressure doing your library music. I did a couple of kind of commissions for guys, and you get into the thing where there's too many cooks. That's another cooking analogy. Too many chefs in the kitchen. Too many cooks in the kitchen. And one guy would say, "Yeah, we want this track at 120 BPM." Okay, so you do the track, and then somebody else said, "No, it needs to be 140." And it's like, oh. And this guy would then say, "We need to change the drums. We need to change this." And what started off as a pleasurable, sorry, I've got a bit of a little frog in my throat.
No worry. We can also take a break if you want.
What started off as a pleasurable exercise can rapidly descend into hell, because people are constantly picking. The library music, at least my experience, wasn't like that. Sure, sometimes I would send in a track and they would just say, "That doesn't work." And usually it was as simple as that. It wasn't, "Well, that doesn't work, but can you?" It would just say, "That one's not working." I would say, "Oh, okay," and I would take it to one side. But I was able to get the skill set where really my strike rate was like 95%. It was very rarely they would turn down a track. But I don't know. I haven't done a live music album for a few years, and of course, this shadow of AI keeps haunting us in the background. And again, it may be something we're going to talk about. The world of live music is going to change, or is changing a hell of a lot. The world of sound design, when I got into it, is changing a lot. Is the same amount of money there to be earned than when I started? I somehow suspect not, unfortunately. I think I was lucky is not the word I want to use. It was just I happened to be there when those opportunities arose and there was income to be earned, if you see what I mean. My orbit just happened to intersect that orbit, and it was just, a bit like the entropic principle. I was able to do what I've been able to do because the conditions were right for me to be able to do what I do, if you see what I mean. Same as life in the universe is the way it is because the universe is built the way it is to make life the way it is, if that makes sense. I think that's called the entropic principle.
Yeah. So did you, so you made library music during the time when you were still at Akai?
Yeah. My first library album came out in 97, I think.
Yeah. And did you stay with Akai until it went down, or?
Yeah, it stayed with him until 2002, and the reign of hardware samplers was coming to an end. Akai weren't able to react, and they were selling hardware, and of course, virtual instruments were coming through. Sales went down and it went bust, and I knew it was going to happen. It was, the writing was on the wall for years, if not months. Should I say months, if not years? Never mind. And I started making plans, and I already had an income stream. I was earning a little bit from the music that I put out. Bear in mind, whilst I was with Akai, I also started DIN, the record label, in 1999, but we should probably talk about that in a few minutes, perhaps. So the music that I made earned a bit, not a lot. The library music was earning a bit, and that was going up. I had some royalties coming in from sound design, so I wasn't starting from scratch. So I knew Akai was going to get bust. So a conversation with my wife, then my first wife, was, this is going to happen. I'm going to be out of a job. What do I do? Do I get a job with another company, which I may or may not get? Do I do a job, or do I try to do this? Do I try to make a go of making a full-time income from my musical activities? And my feeling were, if I didn't do that, even if I failed, if I didn't do that, I'd be at the age I am now, which is 66, and I'd look back and think, you idiot, you had this opportunity. The world opened up. The circumstances where you were given an opportunity where you could give it a go, and you didn't take that opportunity. But of course I did. It didn't, and it just took off because I had the time then. I could spend all day working on sound design, or library music projects, or my own stuff, and that the income just right. And within 2 or 3 years, I was earning as much as I got at Akai, and so I didn't look back. But I'm so glad that I did take that chance, because I think I would have been kicking myself if I hadn't.
So basically, just did more of the kind of satellite things you were doing. So you didn't change anything. You just increased the quantity of the work.
So we've talked about these things. I have 3 income streams. I have what I do within the record label, my own stuff, my own concerts. That's all kind of one vibe. The sound design is a second source of income. The library music is a third source of income. And this is a very, very, very important point for anybody in the creative industries. Do not put all your eggs in one basket. Have several irons in the fire. If the library music income came down on one particular quarter or year, the sound design work might go up. If that went down, what I'm doing might go. I was always getting income from somewhere in some shape or form. Sometimes a big chunk might come through from the royalties, but there'd be things ticking along all the time. And personally, I think unless you're one of the 0.1% who make it huge and can just do the one thing, I think the practical thing is to have several income streams in the creative thing. And okay, you might not be able to do exactly what you want to do 100% of the time, but it's a damn sight closer than what most people ever get to.
Yeah, no, it's definitely always a good it's a good investment strategy, but also I think, certainly creatives need to literally probably need to have multiple income streams, but
yeah.
I think it's a good idea for anybody, frankly. But also in the creative industries, probably more likely that that's going to be the case because there are so many sort of satellite areas, I guess, to what it is that you do where you can contribute as well. Do you find that gives you this kind of peace and calm and security, or you don't? To me, based on our discussion so far, you don't, like you said, like you're able to put things into their boxes and throw them in a dark room if you need to. Were you ever? Did you find that your creativity was influenced by your stress levels, or were you always able to compartmentalize that?
Yeah, I'm trying to think. No, not always. The stresses of life get to us all at times. And I've had some bad things in my life from time to time. We all do, and that is obviously going to affect you. What happens in your creative aspects. The income. See, the income as a creative person is not the same as our regular job, whatever that is. So there's me in 2002. I've been fairly well paid from Akai for 12 years. Every month, the income comes in. The only difference is I got a basic wage and then I got commission. So it would go up and down. So I was kind of used to that a bit. Most people wages, it's the same each month. When you're a musician or an artist, whatever, there might be a month where you get nothing at all. In fact, you might make a loss. And then the next month you might make £100, and you're going, oh my God. And then the next month you might earn 10 grand because a load of royalties come in. You go, okay. It averages out over time. And whilst my mum and dad are in the background going, you need a proper job, get a proper job. This is not a proper job. And I'm sitting with mum, yeah, but it's going okay, and I'm enjoying what I'm doing. It took me a few years to feel a bit more zen about it. It took me a few years to think, this is going okay. It might not go okay next week, of course, but at the minute, this is going okay, and it averages out. So this year I earned this much, and it averaged out. That's kind of okay. I can live on that. The next year, it's a bit more now. That's okay. It took a few years, I think, for calm and to have the foresight to know that it's okay. It's okay to have a bad month. It's okay to have a quarter which is not so good because it'll average out. But, we all need, as a human being, we all need to feel safe. And part of feeling safe is knowing you've got income to actually pay for the things that we would like to have, even just the bare essentials in life, let alone any luxuries on top. So there's always an element, I think, when you're an artistic person of, yeah, it's going great, but is it going to keep going great? Maybe it's not going to keep going. There's always a bit of that, but I never feel as though that stops me being a creative person. And sometimes I'll work on something. Sometimes I call it R&D. I'll work on the most craziest, wildest sound design, weird stuff, thinking, I can't use this in any project. And then somewhere down the line, a company says, we want some sound design. I go, actually, I've got some stuff here. This is perfect for that. So it's never, whatever you do is not ever a waste of time when you're a creative person. I also believe some days you just, from a musical point of view, you just produce crap. You just got to get out of your system some days. You just think, you're sitting there going, it's just not working. Just keep going. And eventually, suddenly something will go, actually, if I change the direction slightly here, this is good. And suddenly, but sometimes you just have to be creative. You have to have the time to be creative. And that's a luxury most people don't have.
Yeah. Obviously, you touched on having multiple income streams as a recommendation for creatives. Do you have any other ideas? If you look at the landscape today, obviously the music industry has and is changing very rapidly. The technology has and is changing very rapidly. Do you have any sort of general advice for musicians, for creatives, for composers, in terms of what they should keep their eye on right now or focus on, or is there any sort of general thoughts about the situation or the environment that we're in right now that has been on your mind and what you would recommend people pay attention to?
It's, you're right. Things have changed since I first started. Things have changed a hell of a lot. What's the biggest thing? The internet's the biggest thing. The internet, all its shapes and forms and everything you can do on the internet's the biggest thing. Because, if I wanted to get in touch with people, I had to send out a letter. If I wanted to do a mail out, it was literally a mail out where I had to, put stamps on and send out letter. And I can get in touch with anybody instantaneously anywhere in the world. I can get my music out instantaneously to anybody in the whole world. And of course, that's got pros and cons. It's got pitfalls and it's got good things. I'm not necessarily the best person to answer this question. And part of that's to do with age. And the whole YouTube social media thing. Yeah, do I know more about it than the average person probably in the Northeast of my age? Yeah, I probably do. I've got a YouTube channel. I know how the social media thing works to a certain extent, but I don't feel as though I play that game as well as a person 20 years younger than me. And that's down to me. It's down to me having enough to do anyhow, and I've got enough to do with the income streams that I've got. And we all know the frustrations. You have a YouTube channel. You know, you have to feed the beast. You have to put content up constantly, and that is a tiring thing. But I'm going to turn it on its head slightly, and I think being creative constantly is the thing to do. To constantly be creative. Now, there's days when you might not feel creative, and that's fine. I go for a lovely walk with my wife and the dog. You need to do that. You need to get away from the studio. Some people are daft to say, I'll say, I'm going away. I'm going away for a break for a week or so. Oh, you're going to take your synthesizers? No, I'm going away for a break. Sometimes you have to have a break.
Yeah.
But I'm constantly creative. And then, so sometimes it's more important to be creative first and then find the income streams than find the income streams and then try to shoehorn things in. And now, of course, there's a bit of a mixed thing here. Sometimes you have to work with what you know. But I think this process of being creative is fundamentally the most important thing. You know, a lot of people ask me for advice and they say, you've done this, you've done that. It's great. You know, how do you judge whether something is successful or not? And that's like, you start thinking, oh, that's a tricky one. And I really do believe fundamentally you should do your art in whatever form it is for yourself first. You should do what is in your imagination and get it out into the world that you are in first. Then, if other people like it, that's the icing on the cake. If you can sell it, that's the little sprinkles on the icing on the cake. But fundamentally, you should be creative for yourself, not a slave to other people. But the reality is, of course, you do have to make an income. But does this make sense, or is it an oxymoron, perhaps?
No, absolutely. And I mean, I completely agree with that. I don't think you can really be an artist if you aren't being honest and authentic about what it is that you want to create, and you create the thing that you want to create. And I very much like subscribe to what you said. And I think that has probably been in many ways, what's the word? I was going to say, not the downfall of what I do, but I believe that you have to do the thing that you want to do. And I am kind of the type of person who's going to do the thing first and then maybe learn the lesson afterwards. But I feel like I need to do that. I need to get it out of my system. And I don't want to be super strategic about the strategy cannot compromise the art. It can't compromise the creative process.
Yes and no. You see, the world's not black and white. And philosophically, the creative first for yourself is philosophically the correct thing, I think we both agree on. But the pragmatic approach sometimes means you do have to do stuff for a client, which you might not like 100%. Those are two opposite poles. And most of us probably inhabit somewhere between those two poles most of the time. But I think sometimes you need to take the time to go right to the far pole of just doing it for yourself. But of course, we have to live lives where we have to pay bills. So the pragmatic thing is we sometimes have to compromise our art to create a product that the client wants so you can get paid. If you see what I mean.
Do you feel like, yeah, I completely agree with that as well. But compromising the art, do you feel like you you need to compromise the art itself, or do you feel like you need to put it in a slightly, like give it different clothes, basically?
Well, I've been lucky, fortunate, whatever you want to call it, but maybe it's my choice. I've chosen projects where I can still be me. So the library music albums, they've never come to me and said, "Could you do a honky tonk piano album?" And I would go, "No." They've said, "Can you do music about space or whatever?" Because that's the kind of thing I've got a relatively limited skill set. I'm not a classically trained composer. I can compose things in my style, in my little world. The sound design guys who come to me, they want a certain thing from me, and as the years have gone by, the whole modular thing, I've become known because I've used modulars right back from when the VCS3 is effectively a modular synthesizer, albeit it uses pins in a pin board rather than patch cords. I'm known for that, so I choose projects. I have the luxury of being able to choose projects which not only give me an income, but still allow me to have an artistic, creative input. I have to compromise a bit, but it's not total compromise. Otherwise, you might as well get a regular job, at least in my opinion. So, yeah, so I suppose that's another way. Each musician, artist will have their own style, their own voice. And if you consciously choose projects which allow you to express that voice, then what we're talking about doesn't become so much of a problem.
Yeah. I think that goes back to something we touched on earlier, which is to kind of understand the framework of what you're trying to serve. Like, what is the kind of the practical function, if there is such a thing, in that project? And then within that, you can be creative as long as you're hitting kind of the outlet points that it's meant to, have.
Yeah, I mean, when I did the library music about space, I could do all sorts of weird and wonderful things, but I couldn't put in like something that wasn't about space. I had to be about space, but that's not really a big compromise for me. For example, so that was okay. I mean, the track had to be 3 minutes long. I like doing long tracks, but in that context, is it really that much of a hardship for me to do a 3-minute track? It's not really. In the great scheme of things, it's not really a hardship. So, yeah, if you can choose projects that are both financially good for you, but allow you to express yourself creatively, that's great. I mean, obviously, I can't. A live music album, I'm not expressing myself quite as much totally as I do in one of my own albums, but it's not that far off.
Yeah, and often it's a interesting, creative or intellectual challenge as well. It's it can be a lot of fun, and like you said, it can teach you a lot about how to make it happen. We should probably touch on Din. Like, when did that come into the picture?
Din was formed in 1999. I had lots of records out before then, on vinyl, cassette, on CD, either on little small independent labels, or I kind of put stuff out myself. Wasn't any kind of plan. The kind of stuff came out whenever it was, there. But I hankered after setting up a label. I tell you who I was really into in the 90s was Fax Records, from the sadly departed Peter Namluk run Fax Records. You must be aware of Fax Records. FAX. If you're not, you should look into it.
Not sure.
Okay,
not sure.
So in the 90s, Fax Records,
horrible with names,
a German record label by this guy, and I liked a lot. There was a lot of quite groundbreaking ambient electronic on there, and there were several aspects about it that I liked. In fact, I nearly did an album with Peter Namluk from Fax, but life events got in the way. But that's a whole different story we don't necessarily need to touch on. So I had this idea of setting up a record label where I could have a set number of releases each year. I would use my contacts. I had already had distribution and stuff. one of the things I really wanted to do was work with other musicians outside necessarily of my comfort zone. Obviously, Akai, I mentioned Tangerine Dream, Cloud Shoulders, who I got into when I was a teenager. My musical heritage is the Berlin School kind of side of things, which is cool. But there was other guys doing interesting things outside of that, and I wanted to work with them. And I used some of the aspects of fax. I like the fact that it was a very simple word, 3-letter word. I came up with din, which is a kind of a bit of an in-joke, because din in English means a loud, awful sound. There's also the din standard in Germany from the 5-pin din plug. And I wanted also the label to have an aesthetic identity. Fax kind of had an aesthetic identity, although I didn't think it was that great, if you don't mind me saying, but I wanted this label because I'm still interested in art, of course. So I set up Din Records while I was still at Akai. The first 3 albums came out in spring of 1999, and I run it since then, and it's just had its 94th album out. It's also had the Tone Science series out. There's 10 of those. There's also digital albums out. There's a whole host of stuff, probably more than we've got time to talk about, but we can maybe stick a link on the podcast at the end for folk to have a look at. And it's been what I've done really, certainly since I left Akai in 2002, or I was made redundant. Din's been a big part of what I've done. And the label has run from strength to strength. It's not a massive label. It's still a small independent label that my wife and I run. And I would like to think it's got a good reputation, and I like to think the roster of artists on there are interesting, and the music is, for those who want to listen to that, is cool, is good.
Yeah, it's a really interesting, because I'm not very used to or know many labels that are sort of, because there's a way of thinking about a label, like this label releases this type of music, whereas maybe I and a lot of other people think about individual artists and not the label very much. Of course, it gets a bit different when you get to these niche kind of labels and specific genres. So is it like when you are when you bring an artist on, what are the main things that you're looking for? Because I would presume you want to maintain the din sound to an extent. Obviously, probably not to like a very you don't want to get in the way of the artist, but there's presumably, like, how would you describe the din sound, and what are you looking for in an artist?
So there's a few things to say here. What do most record labels want to do? Sell more records. Sell more records. You want to sell more records. And if that is what you want to chase, you don't do a label like Din. Yes, I'd like to sell more records, of course. I'm not saying I wouldn't like to sell more records, but Din is a niche independent label that is basically a reflection of my musical personality. I curate Din. Now, the music is electronic. It's ambient at times, is what I mean. But most people, ambient's a much overused word. There's a lot of rhythmic stuff on Din, but it's never techno. It's never dance. Sometimes the terrible term IDM gets used, but it's kind of, sometimes it's spacey, sometimes it's more experimental. There's a whole range of artists on there. So it's not like 90 albums all the same. There's quite a big range. Sometimes it gets toward the prog side with guitar, but it's never bands as such. It's always like one guy or a couple of guys, a duo, or I'll work with somebody. Occasionally it's a group with three guys in. It's never a rock band. It's not dance. It's a reflection of my musical personality, and the people and artists who I've invited to be on there are people who I either personally know and I respect them for what they do artistically, or it's musicians who've got in touch with me where I've thought, this is good. They are doing good work, and trust me, I get sent a lot of stuff, and a lot of it's not that great. But, it's a judgment I've got to make. I don't want to make a loss on any release, and I've never made a loss on any release on Din. But, the kind of quantities, most of the albums, when they first started off, 1,000 CDs. You would do 1,000 CDs. You'd sell 1,000 CDs. There's a couple of albums I've had a couple of thousand CDs. But these days, most is 500, and even that's getting quite tough to sell. So we're not looking at huge amounts here. Now, an important point here is I mentioned before that the library music gives me a financial foundation, and it does. And an important thing that allows me to do is to maybe be a little bit more indulgent with Din and not to chase the income. To put stuff out that I genuinely think is good. And if it only sells a couple of hundred and it breaks even, I'm happy with that. It doesn't have to earn tens of thousands. I don't have to constantly chase sales. So I've never set Din up as this multinational big corporation who signs up people's souls. It's not what it's about. In fact, I never even take the copyright off people. The publishing rights always stays with the artists at the level that I'm at with Din. I wouldn't think it's morally right for me to take the publishing rights. The publishing rights for me stays with the artist. So any income they get from airplay or whatever goes to them. I just look at the sales of the physical and obviously digital downloads, and that works for all the artists. It's a very simple deal. It's a profit share deal. So Din pays for everything up front, does all the costs. Artists doesn't have to put their hands in their pockets. Any profit is just shared between us. Simple as that. I think that's quite a refreshingly modern, open way of doing things, rather than, as I said, you get into big record company, and yes, the rewards can potentially be high, but you get into all sorts of issues that we all know about, and that's never interested me. It's not what Din's about.
Yeah, well, it sounds like an approach made by an actual artist. When I was studying at university, and I was learning the music business and how labels work, I was mostly appalled. I couldn't believe the system worked the way it does. And I think even there's something about, because your music is so deeply personal to you, and you want to feel like it's respected properly, that it's given the sort of appreciation that at least a part of what, like, to some extent similar to yours. And also I think a lot of artists have this like kickback feeling when they feel like their music is just seen as a product. Obviously it is a product, and it will be sold as a product, but if the business side kind of treats it like that and nothing else, and you're continuously extracted all of these different rights, and also you gotta in the end pay for everything yourself if you make any money with the music. You feel a bit, the whole thing feels a bit soulless and empty.
Yeah, I mean, there's several philosophical points there. Capitalism, which is what the West's built on, is a soulless thing, really. Because if the pursuit of income is your primary focus, the looking after people is not going to be part of that. They take it to the ultimate extreme. And, there are lots of good record companies out there, but we all know of the practices, especially in the past, of how the artists were fleeced, and now there's a whole load of other download companies doing just the same, but in different ways. I have no control over what anybody... Well, let's reel this back slightly. I have no control, no artist has any control over what anyone's going to think of their art. And if you worry about that, you're going to go around in circles and disappear. You've got to get yourself to a point where you don't worry about what the reaction is. You do what you do. And if you build up a fan base over the years, that's great. And I always said it's the icing on the cake. If anybody likes what you do, and then if anybody actually buys what you do, it's always the icing on the cake. It's not fundamentally what you should do. When I run Din, yes, I do earn an income from it. The artists do get an income from it, but I would hope there's an honesty and an integrity to what I do with Din that is a reflection of who I am. And if people pick up on that and appreciate that, that's great. But if they just buy the albums and listen to the albums and enjoy it, that's great. It doesn't matter to me whether people appreciate what I do personally, but I think I probably know quite a few people do, because I know the artists who are on there trust what I do. I've quite honestly, in 26 years now, never had a single argument with any artist on royalties, ever. And one of the important things with money in business, as far as I'm concerned, pay your bills, pay them on time, never mess anybody around. Because if you do that, people get pissed off. So when the royalties are due, the statements go out, and then when the invoices come back, I literally pay the same day or the day after, whatever. Never mess out. Never mess anyone about with the money side of things, and your business will run well. You probably won't make a fortune, but I'm not bothered about that. I'm doing okay.
Yeah. I'm a big, well, I actually like ambient music overall, but especially probably out of all of the sub genres is dark ambient. Do you have any thoughts on dark ambient music?
Yeah, I mean, it's a genre. I mean, these genres are getting, there's so many genres now. It should be quite simple. When I was a lad, is music. I'm being a bit facetious there, but dark ambient. I mean, the term ambient didn't even exist, I don't think, when I first started off. Although maybe Brian Eno in the early 70s, I guess. Discrete music and stuff. Dark ambient certainly didn't exist. Darkness in art is a thing. Some of the films I like are very dark. They have a dark theme. Eraserhead was a very dark film. It's a fantastic film. Some of the books I read, H.P. Lovecraft, they have a dark edge to them. There's something appealing.
Nice.
There's something appealing about darkness. And it's difficult to pin down what it is. I think sometimes human beings, the animal side of a human being likes to feel safe. So if something awful is happening to somebody else in a film or a book, it isn't happening to you. So therefore you feel safe. Perhaps that's part of the appeal. But the dark side of art is always appealed to people. The what if, that's often a comment. That's often an important question I say to myself in the studio. What if I do this, this and this? But that's an aside. But anyhow, so dark ambient. So a lot of what I do has a dark atmosphere. And often what I'll do is contrasts. I like something that is beautiful that suddenly gets dark, or vice versa. I like these contrasts. It's like going for a walk where you're in the forest and it's overgrown and it's dark, and suddenly you come out into a glade and the sun shines down. This contrast is an important part in art, in everything. So dark ambient, I'm probably not answering your question directly, but it's as important a genre as anything. But there is a certain element to us all, I think, which is drawn to the darkness, whatever that is. And I'm as much as anyone, and I've done some pretty dark stuff over the years. Not necessarily a whole album, because I like contrasts. We're talking about my album, The Deep, before. That goes right the way down to the bottom of the sea, which is a very dark place, and who knows what's down there, which is why it's interesting, of course, because then it becomes the what if question. What's down there? What if I went down there? Yeah.
Yeah, so it's very interesting you mentioned Lovecraft, because I've written one dark ambient album, and I want to do more, but it's like Lovecraftian based, because I used to. We don't play actively right now, but we used to play a lot of Call of Cthulhu pen and paper.
Yeah. All right. Yeah.
And I was very inspired by that, and I was like, I have to do my own thing. And so, have you listened to any like specifically Lovecraftian dark ambient out there?
Probably not. I mean, I just kind of pulled Lovecraft off the top of my head. He's an interesting character, to say the least. Some of his views weren't maybe as pleasant as you would like, shall we say. His writing ability wasn't that technical, But what he did, and there's several other authors I could mention. I like science fiction. I mentioned before, especially the Golden Age, the oldest tales of science fiction. Like a lot of Gothic horror. I've got quite a nice collection of books from authors who aren't maybe as well known from 150 years ago. Another one to mention alongside H.P. Lovecraft's Clark Ashton Smith, who's not as well known, but Edgar Allan Poe, of course. What these guys do, and women authors as well, of course, and what I like most about a lot of the art, music, films that I watch is the creation of an atmosphere. I think I've talked about this a few times. And even when I'm walking in nature, I like to feel an atmosphere because it stimulates my imagination. Lovecraft certainly creates an atmosphere. Some of the films that I watch definitely create an atmosphere. Some of the art I like, some of the even classical stuff that I listen to. One of my favorite classical composers is Debussy, who does some beautiful pieces of music that literally, and it's a phrase that I use for my own stuff, it paints pictures and sound. It creates an atmosphere. And that's what I like about this stuff. And dark ambient certainly creates an atmosphere, but I've probably personally not done a whole album that you described, but there's elements on there, but it often has contrasts. I often look for contrasts.
Yeah. It's very interesting what you said about the darkness kind of giving safety and security. Of course, like, because you mentioned it in the context of horrible things not happening to you, and that's kind of safety creating. But also, like, to me, I'm not very, like, obviously a lot of the dark ambient is done in a more horror sense. I'm not a huge fan of that, but rather like the kind of dark ambient that I'm especially into gives you this sort of, it's like you're almost floating in a dark void. And I get this deep sense of safety and security from it, because it's almost like the music gets to the level of where nothing matters, and the, how can I put this into somewhat decent words? It's like it gives this ultimate perspective on life, that all the trouble and all the mundane problems we ultimately what we experience in life are kind of meaningless, and it gives me security and comfort to experience that, because you kind of go into not a different dimension, but you're kind of looking at the Earth from space, and you're like, well,
yeah, well,
this doesn't matter.
It's like a transcendental kind of vibe. Well, that's like an atmosphere. It's like a headspace. It's the music's allowing you to look inward, I guess, rather than outward. It's creating a feeling within yourself. I mean, probably the closest I've got to dark ambient, which, if you don't mind, I'll mention, is this album Caged, which has just been reissued by Mute Records, which is an album I did in 2000 with Chris Carter from Throbbing Gristle, who you may have heard of. And that's a very dark album. And there's a couple of tracks on there. Cozy, Chris Carter's partner, we took her voice and time stretched it to an enormous amount. In fact, there was one track, I've always wanted to call a track, it's simply called Slab. And it is just a slab of dark drone. You'd probably love it, actually.
Sounds like it.
And you can detect that it's a voice, but you have no idea. All the context of what makes a voice, which is a fairly short timescale events in a voice, is stretched right out. And that's probably the closest to an entire album, what you would call dark ambient. I remember there was a review in The Wire magazine when it first came out, which is one of my favorite quotes ever on a review, which said, it's like all your Harry Lime moments have come at once. For context, Harry Lime is the antagonist anti-hero in the film and book The Third Man, with that black and white film noir in Prague with all the dark streets and stuff. Has that vibe. Again, it's creating an atmosphere. But I don't tend to do drone albums where the whole album is drone. There tends to be sections which may be drone, based, but then rhythm will come out of it, or something lighter will come out of it. But I do see what you're saying. I'm thinking of an American artist called Steve Roach, who does albums which often the sound sculpture, the sound texture will last a long time. And it's an interesting thing, this about time. Klaus Schulte did this a long time ago. He would take tracks where it would take a long time for stuff to happen. And you can basically get lost in it, like this drone you're talking about. So Klaus Schultz and Steve Roach are similar, but different. But they have this idea of time is stretched out, so you're not looking for events. Most music's got events. This is happening. There's a climax, crescendo, diminuendo. Things are going on. When things aren't going on, but there's just this sound which you can inhabit. I also remember a lovely quote from Julian Cope about the very early drone Tangerine album called Zeit, which means time. I don't know if you've ever heard this or not. And his quote was, "The album becomes the room." In other words, the sound becomes this space that you can inhabit. And this maybe gets to the transcendental state that you're talking about.
Yeah. No, yeah, it's absolutely like it's kind of you transport to this different space. You don't really occupy reality anymore as it was. Kind of looking from the outside, from the inside out, I guess.
Yeah, I mean,
it's so peering into the fabric of reality itself in a weird way.
No, I don't think it's weird at all. It's you either you'll either get or appreciate that form of sound or art, or you won't. The vast majority of people won't. They'll probably say it's boring. Nothing has happened. And maybe you can counter with that. Well, why should something happen? Maybe it's an interesting thing that nothing is happening. You can take that to the ultimate. John Cage's 4 minutes 34 seconds. Not. There's no sound, but of course there's always some sound. It's that kind of question. It's a philosophical kind of thing. Some people will. Well, the minority of people will get that. You and I will. The vast majority, I'm afraid, won't. They'll say, "Come on, something should have happened by now. This is a boring thing." But that's that's just the way it is.
Yeah. I have this thing that I call like creativity retainment theory. Well, I guess it's not a theory because I'm not proposing anything, but I'm fascinated by people's creative people's and artists' ability to actually retain creativity throughout their lives, because I've seen a lot of people who were into music, even studying music at university, and they give it up eventually or move into something else. I'm not saying that all of them give it up because they kind of give up on it, but they grow into something different. So, but I also know that I know a lot of people who would like to do this music thing or a creativity thing, but just haven't figured it out. I mean, that's why this podcast exists, frankly.
I get it.
But it doesn't sound like you struggled very much with retaining creativity throughout all of these phases. But maybe you can correct me if that's the wrong impression I got.
No, I'm, as I said before, I'm 66. I was 18 when I first started playing a synthesizer. Is it as fresh and exciting as when I first started? Well, kind of not in a way, because those first steps and learning and you're not going to retain that. But do I still get excited about art and making music? Yeah, yes, I do. And I don't know why. It's just the way I'm built. It's just my genetics, the way my brain is wired, is the way it is. And I mentioned before, to be creative, you have to have time. You have to have time to be indulgent. And often I'll spend time when I'm just thinking. I'll be out with my wife. We'll be on the beach. She takes lots of photographs. She's done a lot of the artwork for the dinner albums, out of the dog throwing the ball. And I'll be gazing out over the sea and I'll be thinking, yeah, I do this and I do. And I get ideas to just kind of, middle of the night, I'll wake up. Oh, I'm awake now. Yeah, I need this idea. And I'll go and write something down and I'll do it. It just never stops. Sometimes I want it to stop. Sometimes I'm like, it's 3 o'clock in the morning. For God's sake, brain, shut up. But it doesn't. I don't know why. I'm sure there might be a biochemical reason why, because it's all biochemistry going on in there. Whoever you ever meet in your life, however their brain is wired up, it's all biochemistry. It's just one big, extremely complicated chemical reaction. I mean, ultimately extremely complicated, but complicated beyond anything we're probably capable of quite understanding at this point in time. But I believe ultimately that's what it is. And we're all wired completely differently, which is why you should respect other people and not be an arse, but that's another philosophical question. And I'm just the way I am, and I still love doing what I do. Do I want to slow down a bit? Yeah, I kind of do. I'm at the age where most guys of my age or people of my age would retire now. And I'm getting a pension, which helps my income. Do I need to do as much work? No. Work meaning, put out albums, do concerts. But will I ever stop composing and playing with sound? And I don't think so. You might as well tell me to stop eating food. It's not going to happen. I think I'll just... I'll be lying in a hospital in those final days with a VCS3 going beep 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 beep, because I love it.
Yeah. Do you ever struggle with like a creativity block? And if you do, what do you do to get past it?
I don't want this to sound facetious, or I'm just sitting kind of belittling this subject, but kind of no, but yes and no. Not really. I've never sat around with my head on my hand going, I can't write anything. What I'll just do is some days I'll just go for a walk. I don't need to do music every day. I think you should have time away. If I go on holiday with my wife, to Italy this year, we just went to Italy and went to Rome, and I didn't have to have synthesizers with me. I didn't need to think about synthesizers or music for a whole week. We saw art and ate nice food and drank nice wine, and that's great, and that refreshes you. So I think you have to have time away from art, whatever art you do, and you will have a way of doing that. For me, it's walking in nature is the best thing to be honest. Doesn't cost anything. It's exercise. It's good for your body. It's good for your soul. And you just clear things out. And then other days, like I said, you might just do stuff and you'll think this is bad. Do it. Just do it. Keep doing it. Because trust me, something along the line, it could be hours, it could be even a couple of days, it could be more. Something will suddenly pique your interest and you go, aha. Often I make the analogy of walking through a forest, a big forest, and a lot of the time we walk on well-trodden paths. And you can get kind of bored, you get familiar with the path. What you should do is you should go off on these little side paths. And sometimes you'll go off on a little side path and it might be really overgrown. I'm not making any headway here. And just when you think you're going to turn back, you'll notice there's a little path off that path. And then you turn down that path and you go, aha, this looks more interesting. But you sometimes have to go down these little side paths that take you nowhere or don't seem to take you anywhere to discover these other, more interesting little side paths that you hadn't seen in the first place, if you see what I mean.
Yeah. Yeah, breaking patterns. That's a big thing. And also, like, going back to the biochemistry, like you talked about, like, even if you're working on something and you're not feeling it, do it anyway, finish it, because the biochemistry of the human mind, like, you're going to come back to that track tomorrow and think like, this is amazing. Did I do this? And like, why did I not realize it? And then you're going to have days when you're like, this is the best thing ever. And then you come back the next day and you're going to be like,
no, it's
wow.
not.
No. But the point is, like, you're going to feel differently every single day. You're going to have fluctuations. So like that's why you need to trust the process also and give
Yes.
things time and perspective, because you're not going to be the same, person walking into the studio every day. So you got to give things time.
That's why a question you haven't asked me, which is fine, because I know we're talking about, you often get the dumb question. It is dumb in a way. What's influenced you? When I ask, it's everything I've ever done, everything I've ever seen, everything I've ever heard. It all goes in there. It all goes into this incredibly complicated biochemical process in my head, and it filters out things. So if I hadn't have done this or I hadn't have done that, every day you wake up, you're a slightly different person than the person you were the day before. Not very different, but slightly different. So, yes, trust the process is a very important phrase. And, sometimes I'll work and I'll come up with ideas and just record stuff as well. Because a lot of people work in the box, in the computer these days, they don't necessarily record everything. When you work with the modular synthesizers, record it, because I'll never get it the same twice, which I quite like, by the way. There are times when working in the box is the correct thing to do. Library music reproducibility is an important thing. They'll come back maybe 6 months later and say, can you remix that track? I have to be able to do that. It's part of the deal. Working with the modular synthesizers, it's like waking up on a fresh day. It's completely new. And every time I patch it up, it's completely new. And then you have to record it, because I'll never get it the same twice. Does it bother us? No. Because life never the same twice.
Yeah. Let's actually shift into talking about synthesizers. We have to get a bit geeky about this. I mean, we're on the modular subject, so I might as well get it in here.
Yeah.
What for you is the magic or the appeal of modular?
Expression. Now, I've struggled over the years. I've fought the battle with people saying synthesizers aren't real instruments. They're not expressive. They're not as expressive as a real instrument. Bullshit. If anything, it's possibly the most expressive instrument, because you can sculpt the sound exactly how you want. Analogies are something I like. Imagine sound as clay. It's like being in a clay pot. With your hands, you can literally sculpt the sound. So for all those people out there who say modulars aren't real instruments, it's nonsense. They're just as valid an instrument as any other instrument. You have to learn it like any other instrument. You have to put the time in to master it. Unfortunately, 99% of people don't do that. They just buy these bits of gear. They don't really know what they're doing. They make a few sounds. They put it up on social media or whatever, and they think that's it. That's not it. That's just the very first baby step. You have to master it and learn it like any other instrument. And once you do that, I can create sounds from within my head that I've never heard before.
Yeah. This might be a bit of a silly question, but I want to see where it goes. So I'm just going to ask it the way it is. Do you have a favorite form or type of synthesis?
Well, it's certainly not a silly question, and you can probably guess the answer. It's subtractive analog synthesis, because that's what I was brought up on. I was brought up on using VCS 3s and Roland synths and the Roland System 100M, which I still have here. So that was, that's what I've used many forms of synthesis. I never get involved in is the analog better than digital debate. It's nonsense. It's like saying is red better than blue. It's not. It's a nonsense. You as a musician, you should use the musical instrument or tool that is required for the piece of music you want to do. And for what I want to do, synthesizers is it. That's what I want to use. But I will use lots of other techniques, not the least of which, of course, is that Sonic Couture thing, which you've done the review of, is granular synthesis. You don't get more digital than that. And it has massive advantages of things that analog synthesis won't do. But it has a sound of its own. It has a flavor of its own. which is just as valid as any others. But for me, of course, my musical heritage is analog subtractive synthesis.
Yeah, I have an potentially even sillier question, which is, and I always do this with synth people who I have on the podcast. So, do you have a favorite synthesizer? What is it and why, if you do? The head scratching
Right.
tells me that.
Well, I'm not going to answer your question as simply as maybe you would like. The first synthesizer I ever played was the VCS3, which you mentioned a few times, which I bought one in 1993 when I picked it up very cheaply when they were basically being given away, and now they're very expensive. It's built like a piece. It's not. It's a crazy thing. It's one of those things that has a life of its own, and I'll do patches with it whereby, say, for example, I've got this little feedback filter patch with just 3 pins, and it's like a living, breathing organism. It literally does its own thing, and I've got little control over what it's doing. I kind of bring it to life, and it does its own thing, and I love that. The second part of not answering your question straight away is a modular synthesizer. I've got several. I've got a Roland System 100M. I've got a big Surge system, Eurorack systems, a Buckler. When I connect them all together, it's one instrument. It behaves as one thing. So not I can't say this modular over here is better than this modular. To me, it behaves as one thing. So, the modular synthesizer, you could say, is my favorite instrument. But we were talking also about expression. And when you play keyboard, I listen to a lot of synthesizer players, and they buy these big fancy synthesizers, and then they get a string preset and an organ preset and a brass preset, and you're like, okay, you can do anything you want. Why do that? And a lot of keyboards, there's not that much expression. It's certainly getting better. I use a very interesting keyboard called the French Connection, which is made by a company called Analog Systems. And it's a modern modular analog version of an Ons Martineau. For those who don't know, the Ons Martineau was invented the same year the theremin was invented, that weird thing that you wave your hands around in the air and you don't actually touch it, which is always a good pub quiz question. The Ons Martineau has a wire on pulley wheels along the front of a keyboard with a metal ring. You put your finger through this ring and you move it up and down in whatever key is opposite. That's the pitch you will get out. But what's also important is there's no sound unless you depress a rocker switch on the left-hand side. Now, the French Connection was made in response to Johnny Greenwood from Radiohead, who use Ons Martineaus, which are very rare now and very expensive, wanting a modern-day equivalent, and the company made him one and then said, this is pretty cool, can we sell more copies? Yeah, sure. So I bought one like 2009 or something, and it has no sound, but it has CV gate outputs, and I can take those to the modular synthesizer, or indeed a regular synthesizer, through CV gate. Now, there's 2 things which are very important. Most synthesizer voices, when you create a sound, you have envelopes which make the sound start, go along for a bit, and then fade out. And you maybe have an LFO to add vibrato. With this, there's no LFO or envelope. You don't need them. You, the player, are the LFO and vibrato. So if I want vibrato, I will wiggle slightly the metal ring up and down, and that produces the vibrato. If I want fast vibrato, I'll wiggle it faster. The same way that a violin player will wiggle their finger on the string will create the vibrato. The volume is created by the rocker switch, which I usually send to a VCA and maybe a filter as well. So not only will the timbre change, but the volume will change. When I depress this, and when I let go and let it go off, it'll go off to silence. I am the envelope, the same way that a violinist, there's no sound until their bow touches the string, and how hard they press or lock will create the sound. This gives me total articulation over the sound. So that's also my favorite synthesizer, because it's the most expressive keyboard I have, and it's become sort of a signature sound that I use. I don't use it on everything I do, because that would be, but when when I need it, I can produce this incredibly expressive, almost like a female vocal sound, although you can get low registers, of course. But when I play a note and maybe wiggle my finger to create a vibrato, when I go to the next note, rather than just playing the next note as a discrete note that you tend to play on a synthesizer, although portamento I'll actually glissando between the notes. It has total glissando if I keep the rocker switch up. Is this all painting a picture how this sounds?
Yeah, I love the instrument.
Well,
It has a beautiful.
Nons Martin
Yeah.
is fan. So it's not a Nons Martin, and that it doesn't have those weird speakers the Ons Martin has, the palm and the resonant, and that gives that can give part of the sound to the Ons Martin. And I use it live, and I see people often lean forward in the seats when I start playing this because they're going, "What's he doing now? How's he making that sound?" And they can see my left. I'm not touching the keyboard, but I'm doing. Obviously, podcast people can't see this. I furiously wiggle my finger up and down, but I'm creating this incredibly expressive sound that's coming right from me.
Yeah, it's one of those instruments when people see it, they go like, what the heck is that? And it's like, it has a beautiful, like haunting,
Yes,
like in a beautifully haunting, eerie sound. And I don't mean like in a horror sense, but
it can
sort
be.
of like, yeah, it can be, yeah. Kind of like almost like an astral type of tone to it. So do you do your own mixing as well?
Yes.
Then was that process also self-taught entirely?
Yeah, I mean, I've recorded albums where it's been mixed in a bigger studio, but these days with technology the way it is, I'm probably same as many people. I have Ableton Live. I have an Apollo UAD interface, so I'll tend to mix in the box. Sometimes I've got an old Revox reel-to-reel. I'm experimenting more as I get more time coming out. I've got an analog desk over here coming out into the analog desk, and then maybe mastering it off to tape just to try out for a bit of fun. But most of the time, I'll mix in the box.
Did you, when you were learning mixing, was there a point where things sort of clicked? Did you have an aha moment or discovery where you went from like, my music doesn't sound the way it does to, this is how I can deliver the type of a sound that I'm after?
Not specifically. I learned most of the basic skills while at Spectro all the way back when I mentioned I was at university, and they didn't have a fancy mixer. It was kind of basic mixer. I can't remember how many channels, maybe 16 or something. But I got quite adept fairly quickly. It was pretty basic stuff, but often I would work with bands and they would ask me to mix their stuff, and you use your ears, I think, more than anything. A lot of the time these days with computers, you tend to look at the screen, and I think sometimes that's not what you should be doing. You should be using your ears. And again, you use the phrase, trust the process. You should trust your ears. If it sounds good to you, it's probably good.
Yeah. You obviously have a lot of hardware these days. For someone who's just starting out today, want to get into music, how would you recommend they use their money? Like, what should they actually buy and get?
Gosh, well, assuming they've got a computer. Should we assume? Do we assume they've got a computer or not? I mean, most households have a computer. Let's say if you've got a computer, get it. There's free. Well, there's doors out there that are free, but get something like Ableton Live Lite. I think that you can get that relatively inexpensively, and that has quite a few nice software plugins already in. And then if you want to get into the software instruments, get a little keyboard controller, and then there's digital virtual modular synthesizers, something called VC Rack. Get VC Rack. I think it's free, although I think you can buy add-ons. Get VC Rack and just experiment. Then you can try out, because modular synthesizers is one of those things. Once you get into modular synthesizers, your bank balance is never going to be the same again. And a relatively simple system which allow you to do a few things is maybe a few £100, which you may or may not have. But trust me, you ain't going to stop. you're not going to. You're going to go down that. You're going to go. I'll need this one now. So something like VC Rack is a good start where you can experiment with connecting a filter to this and connecting a VCA. And what does a VCA? What does an envelope do? So I think if you've already got a computer, I think something like Ableton Lite, a little keyboard controller in a free VC Rack, is probably £150 perhaps, maybe even less.
Yeah.
I'm assuming it's synthesizer kind of thing. I'm not talking about people who want to play rock or anything, because I'm talking from what I
yeah. Yeah. What about? I mean, it's a very known thing that modular people go down the rabbit hole and buy a lot of modular stuff. From your perspective, having all this experience with modular, before let's talk about somebody who's just at the gate of getting into it, and they're like, thinking about, what am I going to spend my hard-earned money on? Do you have any recommendations for them of like, because like you said, once you start buying them, you're not going to stop. So do you have any pieces of wisdom for that poor person who's about to be very poor? What to focus on, what to keep an eye on, what to do and what not to do.
Well, first of all, I'll slightly defend us modular synthesizers. I've got friends who play guitar who've got 20 guitars. You don't need 20 guitars. So it's just a similar kind of thing, isn't it?
It's true.
I would actually recommend you learn a bit first. That's why I mentioned VC Rack, which you can download for free. And some of the well-known hardware manufacturers have licensed some of their modules to be within that environment. I think you can buy add-ons, or you can get a basic set. Learn what a VCA does. Learn what a VCF does. Learn what an envelope does. Learn that in this environment first before you even buy anything. Now, it all depends on what you want to do, because the modular world now, the Eurorack world we're probably talking about, because the Eurorack world is easier, cheaper than getting into Buckler or Surge or any of those other cool guys. Eurorack's cool as well, by the way, so I wasn't making a distinction, but it's less expensive. Because you got to buy a rack, of course, and then you got to buy the modules. So let's say you want to do the subtract. Let's stick with subtractor for the minute. Don't buy fancy stuff. Don't buy things with LCDs on that do 100 different modes. Buy a basic oscillator, a basic filter, a basic VCA, a basic LFO, a basic, envelope. Buy a basic setup. Learn the basics first. Don't try to learn. I don't know. Don't learn an LCD-based algorithmic granular synthesizer thing first. That's down the line. Learn the basic stuff first. Then you can build on that. But learn the basic stuff first. It's like learn to drive a car. You learn how the gears work first. You don't learn how to drive an F1 racing car going at 180 mile an hour. You learn the basic stuff first. Same with synthesizers. Same with any instrument, basically, but certainly with synthesizers.
Yeah. Has there been like a specific piece of gear, or it could be software, hardware or software, that has recently impressed you the most? Something special that has come across your radar and when you go like, hey, that's pretty cool stuff?
No. That's actually true. Gear lust is the kind of thing we're talking about, which we all have. Well, we don't all have, but I'm not I buy a lot less now than I used to, because, hey, I've got quite a bit of gear. I don't need to buy, and there's still stuff on the Surge, for example. I've got a big Surge system behind me. I bought a couple of extra panels a few years ago, and I've now got 8 panels, and that's a world. That's a world that I could never, ever get to the end of. So most of the recent, actually, yeah, I'm gonna point to something on the right hand side here. But there's a specific reason why I bought this, not necessarily because it was new and groundbreaking. It's called Wellspring, and it's a stereo spring reverb. It also has a Bucket Brigade delay in it as well. So why would I buy a spring reverb in 2025? Or was last year I bought it, actually. Why would I buy spring reverb? Because it sounds really cool. And I like the vintage vibe that it has. And a lot of what I do in the recent sound design stuff as well, like I did this for the Sonic Couture thing, I did some impulse responses. And sometimes you've got all these bright, shiny digital reverbs, but they sound like bright, shiny digital reverbs, and the reverb becomes too dominant a sound. So I bought this because it has a flavor. It has a particular flavor to it, which I really like. And the quality is very good. And it's stereo spring, so I can put a stereo input, high level input, and stereo reverb out. And it has a bucket brigade delay, and you can get them into interact and get it to feedback. And it creates a flavor that I particularly like. So in one way, it's not a groundbreaking product because Spring Reverb has been with us since before I started on synthesizers, but it's just a really nice professional box that has a really nice sound. So perhaps that's something I would mention.
Yeah. What does your sort of typical work process look like? Do you have any tips on how to structure your day sort of optimally for creativity, or how do you personally set it up for yourself?
Yeah, I'm not quite sure if you're going to be happy with my answer or not, because it's not structured these days as much. Some days I won't do anything at all. I'm getting older. I don't want to leap out of bed first thing. I'm quite slow. I need to have a cup of tea. I need to have some breakfast, a shower, take a dog for a walk. I don't normally start until like 11. And then I want lunch at 1, and then I might have a lie down. I'm joking. I tend to work just during the day. I don't tend to work on a night now. I like to relax on a night, and I don't. I'm. Let's be honest. I'm getting to an age where I don't feel I need to chase things as much as when I was a young man. So I don't let the work dominate my life now as much as I did when I was younger. And this is neither good nor bad. It's not a judgment. It's just a reflection of who I am and where I am in my life now. And this works for me. And sometimes I've had so many years of work that if I just fitted 2 hours, I'm working on a new album with a musician who I won't mention just yet because it's under wraps, but it's somebody I've known for a while and very highly respected. And I had a couple of hours yesterday. I just had a couple of hours. And I was able to go in, turn the gear on, and do some productive work in a couple of hours, turn it off, and then take a dog for a walk. Because I've done it so long, I'm able to literally go, right, work. Okay, stop. And this is not compartmentalizing though now. This is just having the experience to know what I need to do. I had the piece to work on. I knew what I needed to do, and I did it in 2 hours. And that's a great work-life balance for me at this stage in time.
Yeah. Is your writing process? I obviously get the impression that like you said, music composition for you is like a continuum, and it seems like to be very embedded in the equipment that you actually use. Do you have? Well, first of all, do you ever start writing with like just a melody? Or harmony, or not from a purely experimental modular synth perspective, and also, or is it a mix of things? Like if I need to make this type of an album, do you go in with an idea of I'm going to use this module and maybe then explore that, or do you sometimes just go to your rack and start playing around, or is it a mix of all of those things?
It's a mix of all of those things. Obviously, I can play keyboards. I'm not the best keyboard player in the world, but I can do what I do. Sometimes I'll just explore sound design, and that'll take me in a certain direction. So I may create. Recent example was I doing a concert. I created this lovely atmosphere. It was kind of swirling, spacey kind of atmosphere. And then I thought, yeah, I need some chords here. I want to have some string chords in the background that kind of float, but are slightly obscured by the soundscape. So then I literally sat with a piano sound, a virtual piano sound, and I composed some chords. It just so happens I used one. Now, this might sound like a flippant thing to say. It just so happens I use one of the modes of limited transposition by Olivier Messiaen. That sounds flippant because it sounds quite technical. This is a mode that the 20th century composer designed or came up with. These are symmetrical modes. It has a flavor. In the past, I've used these modes. I know it has a certain flavor. Therefore, I have that skill or information within me to know that I want to use that weird scale because it has different. You can't just play a regular chord progressions. It messes around with them. There's flat notes and sharp notes where there probably shouldn't be, but you kind of, so it makes you play chords that aren't necessarily harmonically comfortable, which puts it into a different space, which is what I wanted on this piece. I wanted the chords to give that feeling of beauty, but at the same time, what's going on here? This isn't quite right. And I don't mean a disharmony that it's a wrong note. Not that there's anything as a wrong. Is there such a thing as a wrong note? I thought it was always a. Never mind. So and sometimes I'll think to myself, I've got a project in the back of my head at the minute, which I'm working on, where I want to use some of the harmonies of Bach. Bach is a pillar, a massive monumental pillar of harmony. And I've got some little things sketched out, and I'll just literally write them on strings or piano on the computer. And then often what I do, I'll take the chords apart to give individual lines that I can send out to the modular system and then create voices that play each part. So I dissect those chords. So the notes then come first. So sometimes, to answer your question, the notes come first because I have an idea, and then the modular might come second. But other times the modular comes first, but then I need to find notes to fit into something. So it varies every time. It's never the same twice.
Yeah. Jumping briefly into like a work-life / creativity balance. You did mention earlier having a child, and of course you have other social elements in your life as well. Have you struggled to find a good natural balance between your creative work and the rest of your life, specifically your social relationships, and how have you managed to make it work?
Well, it's again, everybody's different. I certainly used to work a lot more when I was younger than I do now, and that's hard. And you have to have support. Your partner has to support you in that, and when that's, you have to figure that out between the two of you how that works. But you also have to have time for each other. Time is the most precious commodity a human being has. And trust me, the older you get, the more apparent that becomes. And spending time with those you love is the most important thing. And the music, you might think music's the most important thing, but it's actually not. It's bloody important, but it's not as important as spending time with those you love. Because one day, either you or they won't be there. And then you'll think, you don't want to get to a point in your life where you have regrets, and that's a completely different subject, and we could spend hours on that, of course. So everyone is different, and you just have to make sure. And again, I think it's a skill set thing. I briefly touched on it a few minutes ago. The more you are creative, the easier you can turn it on and off. And you get your studio set in a certain way that works for you. And if you've got an hour, do an hour. If you've got a day where you haven't got any time, don't fret about it. Just do whatever you have to do. If you've got another day, you got all day, great, spend all day. But you might do better work in the hour than you do when you spend all day. You never know. So compartmentalize again. You have to just get the balance that works for you, but never forget those you love.
Yeah, it's actually very, very interesting. We have 2 kids now, and I knew I wanted to be a father, obviously, going into it, but I was sort of cautiously, I don't know, I guess just cautious, because I love music. it's what I would do almost every second of the day if I could. So I was like, I knew I want to have kids. I know I'm going to love them very much, but I actually had no idea just how much I would love them,
Yeah.
and I had no idea how much time I would want to spend with them. So it was obviously now I know that's a truth, but I also want to do music, and I'm kind of figuring out between these, two loves, how is it, how can I actually do a sufficient amount of both while feeling like it's actually constructive and moving forward.
You use the word efficient. It's not going to be efficient, though. It's going to be dirty and messy and crazy, and a little bit out of control. I've had 3 kids over the years, and every one of them is different, and your partner as well, of course, and also your close friends who you love, and your parents, and you have to find time for them. And you said a phrase, I would like to do music every second of the day. That would be a mistake. I think that's a mistake, you see. I don't think you can do any art form every second of the day and do good art. I think you have to have breaks, and you have to have a balance. And I just think you can disappear up your own backside, for want of a better phrase, if you concentrate on the art too much. You have to have downtime. You have to have a grasp of the reality of a life, which has to have space for your children and your partner and your parents. And it has to be there. And if it's out of balance, I don't think that produces good art. Although you may argue, or other people may argue, some of the great artists in the masters have had crazy, bizarre lives, of course. But those are the tiny 0.0. I mean, Van Gogh wasn't an average lifestyle, but well, most of us have to live in the real world, I think. And you have to be at peace with yourself. And again, it partially comes of age. Trust me, it partially comes of age that you always think you can do more, but is that important?
Yeah, I mean, it was obviously an exaggeration because, like I said, I do, like, I was genuinely surprised that I want to be with our kids as much as I am, and I'm still wanting even more. But it's definitely a balancing act to try and get everything in.
Get them a Lego kit, then you'll be happy.
I will definitely. Well, I think they can have my old Legos because I still have them, like buckets full of them back there. But yeah, it's probably lost my point that I was trying to make here, but but it's definitely it's been I wouldn't want to have it any other way. Although I'm right now I'm struggling to, like, I don't feel like I'm doing enough music right now.
What age are your kids?
3 and 1.
Ooh, ouch. That's heavy stuff. It's don't worry, it gets worse. Just wait till the teenagers.
I guess.
As a father, I've had 3 children. There is no way a person can know what it's going to be like before having a child than afterwards. This just doesn't compute. You can tell somebody until you're blue in the face. Until you've actually had a child, it is at one and the same time the most awesome, incredible thing, and at the other time one of the most frustratingly annoying things. It can be both, and that's fine.
And also one of the most difficult things.
Well, that comes in the frustrating and annoying. Yes.
Yeah, but it's like, our son is going through the phase of, I don't want to do anything you tell me or ask me to do. And it's
as I said, wait till he's...
That's the frustration part. I think the more difficult things are the bigger things, like trying to be a good parent, like getting those things right, not trying to make any huge mistakes. And
yeah. I mean, it's like people write books about this. just do what you think. You can't beat yourself up. Just, within reason, of course, we all know the boundaries of what's bad and what's wrong. You can't second guess. There'll be stuff which comes up, and you just have to do your best. It's not easy, as you said. It's not easy.
Yep.
And of course, my kids now, they look at my studio and they go, oh, yeah, they're not bothered. All this gear that I would have, gone, oh my God, look at that gear. They're like, yeah, Dad's away making some daft sounds again. I'm just a dad, and that's exactly how it should be.
Yeah. Talking about what's in store for the future for you, like what's coming up next? I mean, you can go specific if you want to talk about a project, or it could be stuff you're thinking about, planning for. What's in store for you in the near to long-term future?
There's more releases on DIN, although there's probably a finite length to that. I've got a concert in April with another couple of musicians in Liverpool. But I'm also looking forward to going to Venice with my wife in May.
Nice.
So just living my life. I've basically, at my age now, I have boiled my life down to one simple phrase: do cool shit as long as you can. It's as simple as that. We've all got a finite length of time, and I've got to an age where just do cool shit as long as you can and spend time with those you love. That's all you can do. What cool stuff is depends on the person. One person's cool stuff's not the same as another's. For me, it's traveling with my wife, having nice wine, nice food, going out with the dog, spending time with the kids, and also playing in here, of course. And a balance of that, I'm quite happy.
Yeah. Is there a project you would like to do that you haven't done yet?
No,
that's
to be honest,
good to hear.
Yeah, because to trace a soundtrack at my age, I mean, there's people much. I mean, look at John Williams. I don't want that. I don't want that stress and pressure in my life. I had triple heart bypass surgery 3 years ago, which was a big shock because I wasn't expecting it. So that kind of, I don't want to chase work for the sake of chasing work. I want to do what I can do, and I'm quite comfortable, and I'm quite happy, and I've got people in my life who I love, and I do lots of lovely things. I'm in a very privileged lifestyle compared to many people in the world, as I'm sure you were aware. So, I'm quite happy with that, and I just want to keep doing what I'm doing for as long as I can. And then one day I won't be able to do it anymore. And if that's the way it is.
Yeah. All right. Moving into the last few questions. What is your definition of an artist? And this doesn't have to be an all exhaustive definition, but you could explore one particular aspect or take it anywhere. In any direction.
I think it's somebody simply who is able to express their imagination and creativity in an external form, be it art or literature or music or dance or whatever. It's having something in your brain, your imagination, and being able to actually get it out into a concrete form that other people can also experience. Whether they actually get it or not is a whole different question. I'm going to try and keep these answers nice and succinct now.
Yeah, no, I think that's good. If you could send a message onto everyone's smartphone in the world, so it's going to appear on the lock screen of everyone's phone, so they have to see it, have to look at it in order to open their phone, what would you send?
Be kind to each other. Because we've all got one life. We're all different in a way, in biochemically, we're brain, we're personalities, but we're all kind of the same. Doesn't matter what color your skin is or what's been put on you in your society. But we're all we all want the same stuff. Just be kind to each other. Life's too short to be a dick.
Yeah. Is there a guest you would like to see on this podcast?
Marcus Reuter, German touch guitarist who I've worked with on several albums, an amazing musician who also, I think, with many of the questions you've posed would be perfect.
Awesome. Well, maybe you can help me make that connection.
I will do.
Awesome. Is there a creativity-related question or topic that has been on your mind lately that you would like an answer to? Something you've been thinking about in terms of creativity, like a problem or perspective?
No.
All right.
No.
All right, good. Okay, well, we'll put all of your links and social media or websites or whatever in the description so people can see them from there. Is there anything else you'd like to mention or guide people to?
Not really. If some of what I've said has resonated with the people who listen to your podcast, that's great. Some of it might not. The journey that everyone has through life is different. And the music side of things, I think no matter how long you live, you will never, ever get to the end of that journey. No one person can ever experience everything there is to experience in any art form. So every journey is yours. Just keep it to what you want to do as much as you can.
Awesome. Cool. Well, again, thank you so much for taking the time.
It's been a pleasure.
Likewise.